I never expected my quiet life to explode into such drama, but when you have a mother-in-law like Patricia, anything is possible. I'm Emma, and this is the story of how my mother-in-law's greed and assumptions led to one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Growing up, my father always taught me the value of humility and hard work. Despite being the CEO of Anderson Technologies, one of the largest tech companies in the country, he made sure I understood that wealth wasn't something to flaunt or take for granted. My mother shared his values, and together they raised me to be independent and discreet about our family's status. When I met David at a local coffee shop where I worked part-time during my master's program, I fell in love with his kind heart and genuine nature. He had no idea about my background, and I preferred it that way. I wanted someone who loved me for who I was, not for my family's wealth. Our relationship blossomed naturally, and after a year of dating, David proposed. That's when I first met his mother, Patricia. From the moment she laid eyes on me, I could tell she wasn't impressed. Her perfectly manicured nails, designer clothes, and judgmental gaze made it clear she had expected someone different for her son. "So, Emma, tell me about your family," Patricia asked during our first dinner together, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "My parents raised me well," I replied simply, following my father's lifelong advice about discretion. "They taught me good values." Patricia's eyes narrowed at my vague response. "And what do they do for a living?" "They're in business," I said, taking a sip of water. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. David squeezed my hand under the table, sensing my discomfort. He knew I was private about my family life, though even he didn't know the full extent of my background. I had told him my parents were successful but preferred to live quietly, and he respected that. The wedding planning brought out Patricia's true colors. She constantly made snide remarks about my simple taste and questioned how we would afford everything. I offered to contribute to the wedding costs, but she dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "Oh darling, we all know you can barely afford your rent working at that coffee shop," she said with fake sympathy. "David's father and I will handle everything. We want our son to have the wedding he deserves." What Patricia didn't know was that I had already privately arranged with David to split the wedding costs. My coffee shop savings were actually quite substantial, thanks to my own successful investments and the trust fund my parents had set up for me. But I let Patricia have her moment, knowing that someday the truth would come out. The wedding was beautiful despite Patricia's constant interference. She insisted on inviting all her high society friends, while I kept my guest list small, inviting only my closest friends. My parents, understanding my desire for privacy, agreed to attend as regular guests rather than the hosts they actually were. Life after the wedding was relatively peaceful for the first few years. David and I bought a lovely house in a nice neighborhood, something that seemed to puzzle Patricia endlessly. She couldn't understand how we afforded it on David's middle management salary and my new job as a marketing consultant. "Did you take out some massive loan?" she would ask during her surprise visits, I scanning our comfortable home with suspicion. "We're good with our finances," I would reply, hiding my amusement at her confusion. Then came the event that changed everything, the passing of David's father, Robert. He had been the buffer between Patricia's excessive behavior and the rest of the family, often reining in her more dramatic tendencies. His death not only left an emotional void but also triggered Patricia's worst qualities. Robert had left behind a substantial inheritance of $4.5 million, to be divided among David and his two siblings. It wasn't a fortune by my family's standards, but it was significant enough to bring out the worst in people. Patricia, now a widow, seemed determined to control how the inheritance would be distributed. One evening, about a month after Robert's passing, Patricia called a family meeting. David's siblings, Michael and Sarah, were there with their spouses. As we sat in Patricia's overly decorated living room, I could sense something was about to go wrong. "Before we discuss the inheritance," Patricia began, her voice sickly sweet, "I think we need to address some concerns about how it should be distributed." Her eyes fixed on me with barely concealed hostility. David tensed beside me. "Mom, Dad's will was clear about how he wanted things divided." "Yes, but circumstances change," Patricia continued. "Some of us have family obligations and responsibilities that others don't." I knew where this was heading, but I remained silent, watching the scene unfold. "Emma, dear," Patricia turned to me, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've been doing some research about your background. It's quite interesting what I found, or rather, what I didn't find." My heart started beating faster, not from fear but from anticipation. Had she actually managed to uncover anything about my family? "You see," Patricia continued, addressing the room more than me, I've discovered that Emma here has been less than truthful about her circumstances. She claims to have family, but I can find no record of them. No social media presence, no public records, nothing. David's siblings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had always been kind to me, if a bit distant. "Mom, what are you saying?" David asked, his voice tight with anger. Patricia stood up, clearly relishing her moment in the spotlight. "I'm saying that your wife has been lying to us. She claims to have this wonderful family, but I believe she's an orphan who's been making up stories to hide her humble background." The room fell silent. I could feel David's hand tightening around mine, but I gave it a reassuring squeeze. This was getting interesting. "Think about it," Patricia continued, warming to her theme. "She works at a coffee shop when you meet her, never talks about her family, never invites us to meet them. It all makes sense now." I remained calm, watching as Patricia worked herself up into a frenzy. "And now, with your father's inheritance at stake, I think we need to consider the fact that some of us have real family obligations. Emma has no family to support, while Michael and Sarah have children and actual extended families to consider." David stood up, fury evident on his face. "Mom, that's enough." But Patricia wasn't finished. She pulled out what she thought was her trump card, a folder full of papers. "I've had a private investigator looking into Emma's background," she announced triumphantly, "and guess what? There's no record of her parents anywhere. She's been lying to us all along." I had to admire her thoroughness, even if it was misguided. Of course there were no obvious records. My parents had always been careful about their privacy, using various legal structures to protect our family's identity. "Patricia," I said calmly, speaking for the first time since the meeting began, "are you suggesting that the inheritance should be distributed differently because you believe I'm an orphan?" "Exactly," Patricia exclaimed, pleased that I seemed to be catching on. "Since you have no family obligations, David's share should be reduced. It's only fair to those with real family needs." I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. The timing would have to be perfect for what was about to happen. "And what would constitute a real family obligation?" I asked, keeping her talking. Patricia launched into a detailed explanation of why Michael and Sarah's families deserved more, repeatedly emphasizing my apparent lack of family connections. She was so engrossed in her speech that she didn't notice the sound of cars pulling up outside. The doorbell rang just as Patricia was reaching the crescendo of her argument. "Who could that be?" she asked, annoyed at the interruption. "Oh, I took the liberty of inviting some people to join us," I said pleasantly. "I thought it was time they met the family." The front door opened, and the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. My father walked in first, his commanding presence filling the space. Behind him came my mother, elegant as always, and several members of our company's board of directors who had become like family over the years. Patricia's face turned an interesting shade of white as she recognized my father from numerous business magazine covers and television appearances. The folder she was holding slipped from her nerveless fingers, scattering papers across the floor. "I believe you were just saying something about my daughter having no family?" my father asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. David's siblings were staring open-mouthed, while Patricia seemed to be having trouble forming words. You're," she stammered. "William Anderson, CEO of Anderson Technologies," my father supplied helpfully, "Emma's father, and this is my wife, Charlotte. We've been quite curious to finally meet you, especially after hearing about your interesting theories about our existence." My mother stepped forward, her smile razor-sharp. "We've been respecting Emma's wish for privacy all these years, but it seems that some clarification is needed." Patricia sank back into her chair, her face ashen. But the private investigator found nothing because we value our privacy," I explained gently, something I thought my in-laws would understand and respect. David was looking between me and my parents, a slow smile spreading across his face as everything finally clicked into place. All those times I'd been vague about my family's business, all the understated explanations about how we could afford our house, it all made sense now. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," Michael spoke up, looking mortified, "we had no idea." "Of course you didn't," my mother assured him. "Emma wanted to make her own way in the world, and we respected that. We're only here now because it seems some people," she glanced at Patricia, "have made unfortunate assumptions that needed to be corrected." Patricia finally found her voice. But the coffee shop, and the marketing job." "I worked at the coffee shop because I enjoyed it," I explained. "And my marketing consultant role? I actually consult for our family company subsidiaries, among others. I just never saw the need to broadcast that fact." My father stepped forward, his presence commanding everyone's attention. Now, about this inheritance matter, I understand there's some concern about family obligations? Patricia seemed to shrink in her chair. The private investigator's papers lay forgotten on the floor, a testament to her failed scheme. I think, David said firmly, that we should follow Dad's wishes exactly as stated in his will. Equal shares, no adjustments needed. His siblings nodded quickly, looking relieved to put the whole matter behind them. My father smiled approvingly. A wise decision. Family wealth, whether great or modest, should never be a source of division. As the reality of the situation sank in, Patricia's carefully constructed plan crumbled around her. Her attempt to manipulate the inheritance had not only failed but had exposed her own prejudices and scheming nature to the entire family. In the days that followed, the story of Patricia's failed scheme became a cautionary tale in both families. David's siblings, embarrassed by their mother's behavior, made efforts to build better relationships with us. They were particularly mortified when they learned that I had privately set up college funds for their children months ago, without telling anyone. Patricia, however, found herself in an uncomfortable position. Her social standing, which she had cultivated so carefully over the years, took a significant hit. Many of her high society friends, who had daughters or sons they'd hoped to match with David before he met me, now realized that Patricia had been just as clueless about her son's wife's background as they were. The aftermath of the revelation brought about significant changes in our family dynamics. David, who had always suspected there was more to my background than I let on, was amazed but not entirely surprised by the truth. "You know," he said one evening as we sat in our garden, "I always wondered how you knew so much about business strategy for someone who supposedly just worked at a coffee shop." I laughed. "I did try to drop hints now and then. Remember when I helped you prepare for your management presentation?" "You mean when you casually outlined a complete corporate restructuring plan that my bosses ended up implementing?" "Yeah, that might have been a clue." The truth about my background also led to some amusing moments. Patricia, in an attempt to salvage her reputation, tried to rewrite history, claiming she had always seen something special in me. Her sudden attempts to bond with me and name-drop my father in social situations were transparent but somewhat entertaining. "Oh, Emma dear," she would say whenever we had company, "you must tell everyone that charming story about your father's meeting with the Prime Minister." I would usually respond with a gentle reminder about the value of privacy and discretion, which never failed to make her uncomfortable. My parents, for their part, found the whole situation rather amusing. My father, who had built his company from the ground up and never forgotten his own humble beginnings, particularly enjoyed watching Patricia squirm. "You know," he told me during one of our weekly family dinners, "your mother-in-law reminds me of some of the shareholders I dealt with in the early days. They were so focused on appearances that they couldn't see the real value right in front of them." My mother added, the look on her face when we walked in, "I haven't seen someone that shocked since your father bought out his biggest competitor without anyone knowing it was coming." The inheritance issue was settled exactly as Robert had intended, with equal shares going to his 3 children. David and I decided to use his portion to set up a charitable foundation focusing on education and entrepreneurship, something that would have made his father proud. Patricia's reaction to this decision was predictably dramatic. "But why would you give away such a fortune?" she demanded when we announced our plans. "Because, Mom," David explained patiently, "some things are more important than money. Dad taught us that, remember?" The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. Patricia, who had been so concerned about family obligations and financial responsibilities, had failed to see that true family values had nothing to do with wealth or status. As for my career, I continued working as a marketing consultant, though I no longer felt the need to be quite so vague about my connections to Anderson Technologies. My colleagues were surprised but appreciative when they learned that the quiet consultant who had been giving them advice was actually the daughter of their company's CEO. "So all those times you helped us navigate corporate politics," my friend Sarah from the marketing department trailed off. "I might have had some insider knowledge," I admitted with a smile. Life settled into a new normal. Patricia's attempts to control family matters became less frequent, especially after she realized that her previous behavior had cost her more than just her dignity. The respect she had commanded through her supposed social status was replaced by a reputation for being calculating and manipulative. David's siblings, Michael and Sarah, became regular visitors to our home, often bringing their children for weekend barbecues and family gatherings. The cousins played together while we adults enjoyed conversations that no longer carried underlying tensions about money or status. One particularly memorable evening, about a year after the inheritance incident, we hosted a family dinner that included both my parents and my in-laws. Patricia, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the meal, finally spoke up. "I owe everyone an apology," she said, her voice lacking its usual artificial sweetness. "Especially you, Emma. I let my assumptions and prejudices cloud my judgment, and I behaved terribly." The table fell silent. This was the first genuine admission of wrongdoing we'd heard from Patricia. I was so focused on maintaining an image of wealth and status that I couldn't see the real treasure right in front of me, a daughter-in-law who embodies all the values I should have been teaching my own children. It was a surprising moment of self-awareness from a woman who had spent most of her life cultivating appearances. Whether it was genuine remorse or simply a calculated move to rehabilitate her image remained to be seen, but it was a start. My father, ever the businessman, saw an opportunity for growth. "Patricia," he said, "why don't you join us on the board of David and Emma's new foundation? Your experience with social networking could be valuable in reaching potential donors." The offer surprised everyone, but it was a masterstroke. It gave Patricia a chance to redirect her energy towards something positive while keeping her tendencies for social climbing in check. As time passed, the story of Patricia's failed inheritance scheme became something of a family legend, told with increasing humor at gatherings and celebrations. Even Patricia learned to laugh about it, though her cheeks still reddened at the memory of that day. The experience taught us all valuable lessons about assumptions, honesty, and the true meaning of family wealth. David and I went on to have children of our own, and we made sure to instill in them the same values my parents had taught me, that character matters more than money, and true worth isn't measured by bank accounts or social status. Years later, when our daughter asked why we lived more modestly than some of her friends despite our family's wealth, I told her the story of how her grandmother Patricia learned the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. "Remember, sweetheart," I said, "it's not about how much money you have or what other people think of you. It's about who you are and how you treat others." She nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "Is that why Grandma Patricia always gets nervous when Great-Grandpa William comes to visit?" I couldn't help but laugh. Some things never change, but at least our family had grown stronger through the experience. Patricia's scheme had backfired spectacularly, but in doing so, it had paved the way for more authentic relationships and valuable life lessons for generations to come. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for Patricia's misguided attempt to manipulate the inheritance. It forced us to confront the assumptions and prejudices that had been simmering beneath the surface of our family relationships. More importantly, it showed that sometimes the best way to handle other people's misconceptions is to let them play out their schemes until they discover the truth for themselves. The incident also taught me that my parents' emphasis on privacy and humility had been wise. There's a certain power in letting people underestimate you, in knowing who you are without having to prove it to anyone. Patricia's greatest mistake wasn't just in assuming I had no family, it was in believing that family worth could be measured in dollars and social status. Today, our extended family gatherings are warm and genuine affairs, free from the underlying tensions that once plagued them. Patricia, though still conscious of social status, has learned to find fulfillment in her work with the foundation rather than in manipulating family dynamics. And every now and then, when someone new joins the family, we can't help but share a knowing smile when they hear the story of how Patricia's $4.5 million inheritance scheme led to one of the most memorable family revelations of all time.
"Move out. You're obstructing a pregnant woman gently caressing her belly," Alicia instructed. I pondered Alicia's comment, wondering if pregnant women truly displayed a kinder expression. Observing the malice on Alicia's face, I shot a quick glance at David. "You can sleep in the storage room," Alicia suggested, and David concurred. My lifelong love for him waned instantly, though a touch of sentiment lingered, leaving me somewhat melancholic. "All right then," I replied, and in response, David happily took Alicia's hand. Alicia gazed dreamily at David, and witnessing their intimacy replaced my melancholy with anger bubbling up from within. "I'll leave by tomorrow, yeah. Oh, maybe you should stay out tonight after all. This is now mine and Alicia's home," David proclaimed joyously. I nodded slightly before exiting the house, contemplating what lay ahead and cracking a smile. My name is Catherine Taylor. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. Before marriage, I worked intensely, but that was over 20 years ago. Nowadays, I enjoy daily chores and sipping coffee, just an ordinary middle-aged lady. that my hobby is investing. I've been doing it since before marriage. Recently, I've been earning significant dividends, treating myself to lavish hotel brunches and spa visits, leading a pretty elegant life. My husband, David, is 40 years old, a salesman for a major company. He's gained quite a bit of weight, and frankly, he's been rather smelly lately. But he's good with words, given his profession. He may look big, but I love him. I felt he should probably lose some weight for health reasons, but he had this cute, mascot-like appeal, so I didn't see the need to force him into a diet. David and I have a daughter, Emily. She inherits David's features. Slim, almost model-like in beauty. Not just in appearance, she's academically top of her class and excels in sports, even making it to national competitions. She's also humble and works hard. It feels like we, the geese, gave birth to a swan. Both David and I dote on Emily, and we've often been told we're overprotective. David has a bit of a weak spot for younger women, but he chose to marry an older woman like me and cherished our family. So I thought a little wandering gaze here, and there was inevitable. We lived in a condo we bought around the time Emily was born, but it was getting old, and they were considering raising the maintenance fees. Recently, amidst all this, Emily decided to share an apartment near her college. At the same time, one of my relatives approached us about inheriting a now vacant house. David and I decided to renovate that house and move there. But who could have known that this would cause issues between David and me, which have been smooth sailing up until then? The condo we had was a 4-bedroom, including a guest room, but the new house is just 2 bedrooms. Although it's smaller than before, considering our retirement, we made it a single story, and it's been very comfortable. One of the rooms, which serves as a study and a guest room, can be divided to make an additional room for Emily if she ever comes back. David started coming home late every night to work dinners, and somehow always found reasons to go out, even on weekends. Sleeping next to David, who would come home reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, was unbearable for me, even if we had separate beds. Because of that, even though we originally shared a bedroom, I've been sleeping in the study ever since we moved. When it came time to send out moving announcements, I mailed letters to various places. David isn't good with that sort of thing. So I took the initiative to send letters on his behalf to his family and relatives. As for me, since my parents have passed away, I simply wrote a brief note and sent it to friends and relatives on my mother's side. I haven't been in contact with any relatives from my father's side because of my half-sister, Alicia. Alicia is my half-sister, 14 years younger than me. When I was in 7th grade, my mother passed away, and about 6 months later, my father remarried. Alicia was born to him and his new wife at the time of their marriage. Alicia was already 2 years old, so I initially thought it was a union of 2 families with kids. About 5 years into their marriage, my father and his new wife were involved in an accident and never returned. At their funeral, relatives from my dad's side told me that he and his new wife had been childhood friends, and everyone had always thought they would end up together. However, my mom had set them up through her boss, and my dad felt he couldn't refuse, leaving his childhood friend out in the cold. To think that behind their smiles, my dad had a child with his second wife was a huge shock to me. Every time we had a family gathering, Alicia's favorite foods were served. She had brand-name clothes, and she got the biggest room all to herself. If she said she wanted to go somewhere, they'd take her immediately. Meanwhile, I was burdened with all the chores, from preparing meals to doing laundry. I had to work part-time jobs, and all the money I earned was taken away. I also had a small storage room under the stairs, and I had to beg for even basic necessities. By the time Alicia was in elementary school, she had heard about my mom from the relatives and started looking down on me. I worked several part-time jobs to save money and finally moved out. It was impossible for me to harbor any positive feelings towards Alicia, and I never told her about my marriage or that I had a child. A few weeks after moving, I was having tea and relaxing when the doorbell rang. When I answered, a man's voice mumbled delivery, and on the screen was a person looking down. I thought maybe David had ordered something and opened the door, only to be left speechless. "Oh, Alicia, why are you here?" "Hi, sis. Long time no see. Just thought I'd drop by," Alicia said while wearing the hat I saw on the intercom. She wasn't a delivery person, but my half-sister. Without waiting for a response, she walked past me, entered the living room, and sat down on the couch. I followed her in a hurry, stood in front of her, and looked down. "I figured you wouldn't open the door if you knew it was me, so I used a recorded voice. That's just low." "Geez, you're scary." I raised my voice at Alicia, and she feigned fear in an exaggerated way. However, it was clear she was just putting on a show, and the proof was that Alicia had a smirk on her face. "I came for a visit," Alicia said, speaking nonsense, getting a cold response from me. Yet she grinned and started explaining the reason for her unexpected visit. "But sis, you never even told me where you live. I got married, but my husband is always on business trips, and it's getting boring. Plus, once my belly starts getting bigger, moving around becomes a hassle, right? Everyone told me to come stay with you. Just go home. I don't even want anything to do with you." "Well, too bad. I already came here planning to stay with you." Listening to Alicia's audacious words only irked me further. Under my breath, I muttered, "Typical of a kleptomaniac's daughter." Hearing that, my anger reached its peak. "Get out. I never want to see your face again." "What's all the fuss about?" "People outside can hear you," David said. I was at a loss for words, surprised by David's unexpected return at such an odd hour. As I struggled to explain, Alicia stood up and walked over to David, intertwining her arm with his. David didn't seem to mind. In fact, he looked quite pleased. "Oh, Alicia here. Welcome, David. My sister was being mean. I thought it'd be nice to stay with you until the baby is born. But is that okay?" "Of course. I'd be thrilled if you're okay with it. You can stay as long as you want." I stood there in disbelief, silently observing the exchange between David and Alicia. The intimacy they shared seemed more like that of lovers than mere siblings-in-law. "David, what's going on?" I managed to utter, but he dismissed me, accusing me of being jealous of my cute little sister. His words left me speechless, considering I had confided in him about my family situation before our marriage. "We have a spare bed in the guest room. You can stay there," David offered casually. Alicia seized the opportunity, expressing her desire to sleep in the same room with him. Their mushy conversation gave me a headache, and as they went to the bedroom arm in arm, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. Peeking into the room after several minutes, I discovered them embracing each other, living out what felt like a dream for Alicia. "The baby is thrilled, too, living with Daddy," Alicia exclaimed, dropping the bombshell that David was the father. As they kissed, I watched through the crack in the door, tears streaming down my face. From that day on, they treated me like a housemaid. I complied, but silently began gathering evidence against them, contemplating divorce. One day, Alicia arrogantly demanded I leave the room, claiming she, a pregnant woman, needed space. The spiteful look on her face contradicted the gentleness usually associated with expectant mothers. Looking at David for support, he sided with Alicia, causing any lingering feelings I had for him to vanish. Still, a touch of sadness remained as David happily took Alicia's hand, sealing my decision to leave. "I'll leave tomorrow," I declared, prompting an elated David to suggest I find somewhere else to stay that night. "This is now my and Alicia's home." I supplely nodded, leaving them to enjoy their laughter while they could. Stepping outside, a grin formed on my face as I contemplated what lay ahead. That night, I checked into a hotel, making plans for the next phase. The following day, I scheduled a moving company and headed to City Hall to start anew. Excitement and thoughts of newfound freedom kept me awake, but my spirit remained high. To my surprise, upon returning home, I found the moving company already confused, as the house appeared empty. A small box with a note greeted me, containing some of my cherished belongings carelessly thrown in. Adding insult to injury, David's wedding ring lay at the bottom of the box. Anger surged within me as I discovered the house in disarray, with evidence of David and Alicia's escapades. I led the movers to pack their belongings, then found a note on the dining table announcing David and Alicia's 6-day trip abroad and requesting the house to be cleaned. The note mentioned that the divorce would be finalized upon their return. David's utter self-centeredness left me dumbfounded, but his absence made executing my plan much easier, and secretly grateful that I had the movers pack all my belongings. I left David's wedding ring on the kitchen counter before departing the house. After some contemplation, I purchased a place near Emily's university, which happened to be on sale. The one-bedroom apartment was cozy, and I cherished the solitude it offered. On the day David and Alicia were set to return, my phone incessantly rang. Without checking, I knew it was them. Answering with a nonchalant hello, I was met with David's frantic voice demanding an explanation. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Remaining calm, I replied, "What do you mean? What's going on?" David, fuming, informed me that the house was gone. Bursting into laughter, I explained, "Well, it was my house, and if I'm not going to live there, why keep it? We were living there, weren't we? Don't worry, everything's safely stored in a storage unit. I'll text you the location and access code." David demanded I bring back the house, but I retorted that it was under my name, and the money used to build it was from my investments, not a dime from him. David seemed to recall his lack of involvement when the house was built, a fact he had conveniently forgotten. Claiming the baby to be his niece or nephew, David pleaded for me to do something about the house, as Alicia was in a tough spot. I informed him that I had known about their relationship since Alicia barged into our house. I had been gathering evidence, including recordings from a high-end baby monitor Alicia had me buy during a fit. The monitor captured everything, even in the pitch dark. Upon revealing this, David was at a loss for words. Cheerfully, I mentioned that the mailbox might have something for him. David checked it, discovering a certified mail. I explained that it was about the payment, and there was one for Alicia too. Unfazed, I insisted it was compensation for their betrayal. Ignoring his plea to talk to his lawyer, I ended the call. A barrage of calls followed, which I ignored. My old phone, used for evidence, wouldn't be an issue if left alone. After an hour of incessant calling, David seemed to give up. The attorney reached out, sounding weary. The next morning, a relative from my father's side called on my new phone, likely having obtained the number from Alicia. Expecting scolding, I recorded the call. The relative demanded an apology to Alicia, who was pregnant, and insisted on a new house as compensation. Unyielding, I refused to apologize to the woman who had an affair with my husband. I asserted that Alicia should apologize and pay compensation. When accused of being a kleptomaniac's child, I retaliated, stating that Alicia's actions were reflective of her father's betrayal. I instructed them to relay a message to Alicia to never get involved with me again, though I doubted she would have the chance. Hanging up on the babbling relatives, I felt the refreshing release of pent-up emotions. I contacted my lawyer, determined to bring Alicia and David to justice. The thirst for revenge lingered until I witnessed the dumbfounded expressions on their faces during our discussion at the lawyer's office. Alicia appeared utterly miffed, while David wore a grumpy expression, showing no remorse. Surprisingly astounded, rather than angry at their self-centered comments, I laid out divorce papers in front of them, accompanied by another set, the marriage license, offering a reduction in compensation if they signed the latter. David snatched the pen from me and signed without hesitation. Alicia, smirking, followed suit. Placing the signed documents in a folder, I gave them a big smile. "I'll submit these to the county office," I announced. Alicia, with a dumbfounded expression, tried to argue, but I revealed that the divorce was already finalized in mediation the day before. Her lack of awareness stemmed from disregarding multiple summonses. As Alicia and David processed this information, I dropped another bombshell: the possibility of David denying the father-child relationship with the unborn child. Alicia stared in shock, and David, realizing the potential consequences looked pale. Between compensation and child support for another man's baby, I wished them luck. However, David attempted to reconcile, citing Emily's presence. Just as he changed his tune, the lawyer's office door swung open, revealing Emily. Her harsh words stunned David, frozen in shock, while Alicia, insulted, shook with rage. Emily cut ties with David, expressing her intention to live with me, referring to Alicia as that loose woman. Unable to respond, Alicia faced Emily's verbal onslaught. I delivered the final blow, revealing David's financial limitations and asserting ownership of the house and car. Alicia's plan to extract money seemed to unravel, leaving her pale and stunned. As I left with my lawyer and Emily, I left them to their newfound reality. That evening, having dinner with Emily for the first time in a while was delightful. I filed for divorce, and around the time Alicia's waiting period for remarriage had passed, David and Alicia submitted their marriage license. The witness section bore my signature, along with Alicia's ex-husband, who had shared crucial information. News circulated that David, involved in an affair with Alicia at work, got fired for misusing travel expenses for secret getaways. He now struggles with part-time jobs. Alicia, taking care of the child, faces financial difficulties after being dumped by her boyfriend. Her attempt to sabotage my family had backfired. Meanwhile, Emily enjoys college life, and I've been leading a relaxed life with my stock dividends. Surprisingly, I've developed a closer bond with Alicia's ex-husband, who affectionately calls me Catherine. Recently, he reached out for an important talk, making me feel a bit restless as I sit in front of my vanity, my face flushed like a smitten young woman.
Pass the gravy down to Uncle Robert, would you, Melissa? My stepmother Patricia's voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted to remind everyone that I was useful for serving mothers. I reached across the mahogany dining table, careful not to disturb the elaborate centerpiece she'd spent 3 hours arranging this morning, and handed the crystal gravy boat to my father's younger brother. Sunday dinner at the Thornfield family estate had been a tradition for 32 years. Ever since my father inherited the sprawling Victorian mansion from his parents. Even after his death 8 months ago, Patricia insisted on maintaining the ritual. 23 family members gathered every week in the formal dining room, seated according to a hierarchy that had never been officially discussed, but everyone understood. I sat in the middle of the long table, between my teenage cousin Marcus and great-aunt Helen, who always smelled like lavender and disappointment. My half-sister Clarissa occupied the chair to Patricia's right, the position of honor that came with being the biological daughter. She'd held that seat since she was old enough to sit up straight, her golden hair catching the light from the chandelier like some sort of Renaissance painting. "So, Melissa," my Uncle Robert said, cutting into his prime rib with surgical precision, "Patricia tells us you're still working at that little law firm downtown. Have you considered something more substantial?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd heard variations of it every Sunday for the past 15 years, ever since I graduated law school and chose to work at a small firm specializing in family law and estate planning rather than joining the corporate practice that handled the Thornfield family's business interests. "Henderson and Associates suits me perfectly," I replied, taking a measured sip of wine. "We handle complex estate work. Quite fascinating, actually." Clarissa snorted delicately, a sound she'd perfected in finishing school. "Estate work? You mean helping old people write their wills? That's hardly practicing law." "Oh, it's more involved than that," I said evenly. "Trust administration, probate litigation, tax planning. You'd be surprised how complicated family wealth can become when proper documentation isn't in place." Patricia set down her fork with a soft clink. "Speaking of family wealth, I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room." The conversation at the table gradually died as her words registered. Uncle Robert paused mid-chew. Cousin Michael stopped scrolling through his phone. Even Great Aunt Helen looked up from her dinner roll. What elephant would that be? I asked, though something cold was already forming in my stomach. Clarissa straightened in her chair, and I caught the look that passed between her and Patricia. They planned this. The realization hit me like a physical blow, though I kept my expression neutral. 28 years of family dinners had taught me to hide my reactions. The will, Patricia said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used when discussing household staff schedules. Your father's will. We've all been tiptoeing around it for months, but it's time to be practical. I wasn't aware there was anything to discuss, I said carefully. Dad's will was quite clear. The estate was divided equally between Clarissa and myself, with smaller bequests to. That's exactly the problem, Clarissa interrupted, her cheeks flushing the way they always did when she was about to say something she knew would cause damage. The will treats us as equals, but we're not equals, are we? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I could feel everyone's attention focusing on our end of the table like a laser beam. Uncle Robert had stopped eating entirely. Cousin Jennifer was staring openly, her mouth slightly agape. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, though I absolutely knew what she meant. I'd known this conversation was coming since the day after Dad's funeral, when Patricia had suggested we reassess the family structure now that the patriarch was gone. Clarissa took a deep breath, the kind she used to take before diving off the high board at the country club pool. Melissa is adopted. She's not actually Dad's daughter. She shouldn't inherit the same amount as me. The words hit the table like a grenade. Several people gasped audibly. Great Aunt Helen dropped her dinner roll. Cousin Marcus, who was 17 and normally glued to his phone, looked up with wide eyes. Clarissa, Uncle Robert said in a warning tone, but Patricia held up her hand. No, Robert. She's right to bring this up. We've all been thinking it. Patricia's gaze swept the table, and I watched as several family members nodded slightly. Harold was generous to a fault, but he wasn't thinking clearly in his final years. The family assets should stay with family. Blood family, Clarissa added, as if the distinction needed clarification. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, watching the faces around the table. These people had been at every birthday party, every graduation, every holiday for the past 28 years. I'd helped plan Uncle Robert's surprise 60th birthday party. I'd babysat Cousin Michael when he was in elementary school. I'd written the legal documents for Great Aunt Helen's trust fund. And now they were nodding in agreement as my legitimacy as a family member was dissected over Sunday roast. The adoption was finalized when Melissa was 3, Uncle Robert said slowly, though his voice lacked conviction. Harold considered her his daughter. Legal technicalities. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. The point is, she's not a Thornfield. Not really. The family money should stay with the family line. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Clarissa leaned forward eagerly. A revised distribution. You can keep the house in the city, and maybe one of the smaller investment accounts. But the estate, the business interests, the family trust, that should come to me. I'm going to have children someday. Real Thornfield children. The phrase real Thornfield children hung in the air like a slap. I felt something inside me go very quiet and very cold. And you all agree with this assessment? I asked, looking around the table. More nods. Murmurs of agreement. Cousin Jennifer cleared her throat. It does make sense, Melissa. I mean, we love you. But But I'm not really family. I finished for her. Exactly. Clarissa's voice was bright with relief, as if we'd finally gotten past an awkward misunderstanding. You can still come to Sunday dinners, of course. Nothing has to change between us personally. I took another sip of wine, buying myself time to process what was happening. These people, my family for 28 years, had just voted me out of my inheritance while assuring me I could still serve them gravy on Sundays. Have you discussed this with the estate attorney? I asked. Patricia's smile tightened slightly. We thought we handle it as a family first. Work out the details amongst ourselves before involving lawyers. I see. I set down my wine glass with deliberate care. And when exactly did you all decide this? Was there a family meeting I wasn't invited to? Now don't be dramatic. Great Aunt Helen spoke up for the first time. We're just being practical. You're a lovely girl, dear, but you're not a Thornfield. The money should stay with blood. I nodded slowly, as if considering their position. Around the table, I could see the relief on their faces. They'd expected a fight, tears, perhaps threats of legal action. Instead, I was being reasonable, diplomatic, just like I always was. Well, I said finally, I can certainly understand your perspective. Clarissa beamed. I knew you'd be sensible about this. You always were the practical one. There's just one small problem with your plan, I continued, reaching into my purse. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. What sort of problem? I pulled out a cream-colored envelope, sealed with burgundy wax. Dad's personal seal, the one he'd used for important documents. Every person at the table recognized it immediately. Dad left me this, I said simply, setting the envelope on the table between the candlesticks, with instructions to open it if anyone ever questioned my place in the family. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to pause its ticking. What is it? Clarissa's voice had lost its confident edge. A letter, I said. Would you like me to read it? Patricia's face had gone pale. Melissa, there's no need to. Oh, I think there is. I broke the wax seal with careful precision, unfolded the pages inside, and stood up. This is dated 3 days before Dad died, witnessed by his attorney and his doctor. My hands were steady as I began to read. Though my heart was pounding so hard, I was surprised. No one could hear it. To my beloved daughter, Melissa, I began. If you are reading this letter, it means someone in the family has questioned your right to inherit equally with Clarissa. I hoped this day would never come, but I know my wife and daughter well enough to prepare for it. Patricia made a small sound like air escaping from a balloon. I want you to know that from the moment you came into our lives, you were never anything less than my daughter. Not adopted daughter, not stepdaughter, my daughter, period. But there are things about your adoption that the family doesn't know, things I've kept private to protect you. I paused, looking around the table. Every face was frozen in anticipation. Melissa is not adopted from strangers, as everyone believes. She is my biological daughter, born from a relationship I had before I married Patricia. Her mother, Catherine Williams, was a remarkable woman who died in a car accident when Melissa was 2. I adopted my own daughter to give her legal protection and a stable family, not because she wasn't already mine. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, but I kept reading. The DNA test results are in my safe deposit box, witnessed and notarized. Melissa is a Thornfield by blood and by love. More than that, she is the child who chose to spend her life helping families navigate legal complexities. who dedicated herself to protecting people's rights, who understood the value of fairness and justice that I tried to instill in both my daughters. Clarissa had gone white as the tablecloth. Patricia was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. For this reason, and because I believe she will honor the family legacy better than anyone, I am leaving the majority of my estate to Melissa. The will filed with the court is not my final will. The real will is in my safe deposit box, along with the DNA results and documentation of Melissa's true parentage. She inherits the house, the business interests, and 80% of my liquid assets. Clarissa will receive 20%, which is more than generous considering her complete lack of interest in anything beyond her own comfort. I folded the letter carefully and looked around the table. The silence was deafening. "There's more," I said quietly. "Instructions for Patricia's widow's pension, which was contingent on her treating me with respect, and a provision that anyone who contests this will or attempts to exclude me from family functions will forfeit their inheritance entirely." Patricia finally found her voice. That's impossible. We saw the will. The lawyer read it." "You saw the preliminary will," I corrected. "Dad filed the real one 3 days later, after he realized what might happen. He'd been watching the family dynamics for months. He knew exactly how this conversation would go." Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "How long have you known?" "Since the day he died. His attorney gave me the letter along with the keys to the safe deposit box. Dad wanted me to wait and see if the family would accept me as I was, or if I'd need to clarify my position." Clarissa's face was a mottled red and white. "You let us believe. You sat there while you revealed exactly who you are," I said gently. "Yes, I did." The next few minutes were chaos. Patricia stood up so quickly, she knocked over her water glass. Clarissa started crying, not the delicate tears she used for sympathy, but ugly, desperate sobs. Uncle Robert was on his phone, presumably calling the family lawyer. Several cousins were talking at once, their voices rising in pitch and volume. I sat quietly through it all, the letter still in my hands. Great Aunt Helen, who had remained silent through the entire confrontation, finally spoke up. "So you're actually Harold's daughter? His biological daughter?" "Yes," I said simply. She nodded slowly. "And you're inheriting the estate?" "The majority of it, yes." "And you could have told us this at any time over the past 8 months." "I could have." Another nod. "But you wanted to see what we do first." "Dad wanted to see what you do first." Great Aunt Helen picked up her dinner roll and took a thoughtful bite. "Smart man, Harold. Always was good at reading people." By the time the initial shock wore off, half the family had left. Uncle Robert and his wife hurried out after a terse conversation with their lawyer. Several cousins made awkward excuses and disappeared. Even the household staff seemed to sense the shift in dynamics. I noticed the way Patricia's personal assistant started avoiding eye contact with her. Patricia herself had locked herself in Dad's study, presumably going through his papers looking for some way to challenge the will. She'd find nothing, of course. Dad had been meticulous. Clarissa sat in her chair like a deflated balloon, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "I'm his daughter too." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And you'll inherit 20% of a very substantial estate. Most people would consider that life-changing money. But you get everything else. The house, the business, the trust fund." "I get the responsibility," I corrected. "Do you have any idea what's involved in managing a family trust? The tax implications of the business holdings? The maintenance costs on this house alone?" She stared at me blankly. Dad knew what he was doing, I said. He left the money to the person who would protect it, grow it, and use it to take care of the family. That's what I've been training for my entire career, even if I didn't realize it. But you're not even really his daughter, she said weakly, then stopped as she realized what she'd said. Actually, I'm more his daughter than you are, I said without malice. Biologically and legally, but that's not why he chose me. Over the following weeks, the family dynamics shifted like tectonic plates. Patricia moved out of the main house and into the guest cottage. Her status changed from widow of the estate owner to dependent relative. She tried to contest the will, of course, but Dad's documentation was ironclad. The DNA test was conclusive, the witnesses were unimpeachable, and the new will had been filed properly. Clarissa went through what could only be described as an identity crisis. Without the promise of unlimited wealth to cushion her future, she was forced to confront the reality that she'd never developed any actual skills or interests. She eventually took a job at a local boutique, which was humbling for someone who'd never worked a day in her life. Some family members, Uncle Robert, a few of the cousins, made genuine efforts to rebuild their relationships with me. Others simply disappeared, unwilling to accept the new hierarchy. Great Aunt Helen, surprisingly, became one of my strongest allies. I always knew there was more to you than met the eye, she told me one Sunday over tea. You had Harold's patience and his strategic mind. The business interests that Dad had built over 40 years were complex and far-reaching. Real estate developments, investment portfolios, charitable foundations, and a small but profitable technology company that he'd started as a side project in the 1990s. Understanding it all, managing it responsibly, required exactly the kind of legal and financial expertise I'd been developing for the past decade. 6 months after that devastating Sunday dinner, I hosted my first board meeting as the primary beneficiary of the Thornfield Trust. The conference room at Henderson and Associates had never seen anything quite like it. 12 board members, 3 attorneys, and 2 accountants, all discussing the strategic direction of a $50 million family estate. Patricia attended, as required by the trust documents, but her role was purely advisory. She sat at the far end of the table, her face a mask of controlled resentment. Clarissa didn't attend at all. She'd waived her board position in exchange for early access to her inheritance. The quarterly reports show strong performance across all sectors, the portfolio manager announced. The real estate holdings have appreciated 12% this year, and the technology investments are exceeding projections. I nodded, making notes on the detailed financial statements. What about the charitable foundation? Are we meeting our distribution requirements? More than meeting them, the foundation's director replied. The scholarship program has expanded to include 3 additional universities, and the family services grants are making a real impact in the community. These were the conversations Dad had prepared me for, I realized. All those dinners where he discussed business strategy while Clarissa played with her phone. All those weekends when he'd invited me to review investment reports while she went shopping. He'd been training his successor, and everyone had assumed it would be his biological son he never had. After the meeting, as the board members filed out discussing lunch plans and golf schedules, Patricia approached my desk. She looked older than her 58 years, as if the stress of the past months had aged her prematurely. I want you to know I'm not giving up, she said quietly. Harold was my husband. This estate should be mine. I looked up from the financial reports I was reviewing. Actually, under Illinois law, you're entitled to exactly what Dad left you: the widow's pension and the cottage. The rest was his to distribute as he saw fit. You manipulated him, she said, her voice low and bitter. Turned him against his own wife and daughter. I helped old people write their wills, remember? I said gently. Dad taught me that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up, who takes responsibility, who protects the people they love. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. That evening, I sat in Dad's study, my study now, going through his personal papers. Hidden behind the legal documents and financial statements, I found a folder marked, "For Melissa." Inside were photographs from my childhood, report cards he'd saved, copies of awards I'd won in school. At the bottom was a note in his handwriting. I always knew you'd be the one to carry this forward. You have your mother's compassion and my stubborn streak. Take care of them all, even the ones who don't deserve it. I folded the note carefully and placed it back in the folder. Outside the study windows, I could see the lights of the guest cottage where Patricia was probably planning her next legal challenge. Somewhere across town, Clarissa was working her shift at the boutique, learning for the first time what it meant to earn her own money. The family I'd grown up in was broken, perhaps irreparably. But the responsibility Dad had left me wasn't just about managing money. It was about rebuilding something better. The Sunday dinners continued, though the guest list was smaller now. The family trust continued to grow and support charitable causes. And slowly, carefully, I began reaching out to the family members who were willing to build new relationships based on respect rather than hierarchy. One Sunday evening, as I was closing up the study, I found Great Aunt Helen in the kitchen making tea. "You know," she said, handing me a cup, "your father would be proud. You handled all this with more grace than any of us deserved." "I had a good teacher," I replied. "Yes, you did. But you also had something Harold always hoped for, the wisdom to know when to be patient and when to act." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "That letter wasn't just about the inheritance, was it? It was about showing everyone who you really are." I smiled. Dad always said the truth has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. And now? I looked around the kitchen where I'd helped prepare countless Sunday dinners, where I'd learned that family was about more than shared DNA or legal documents. Now we build something new, something better. Great Aunt Helen nodded approvingly. Harold would like that. He always believed in second chances. Third chances, in some cases, I said, thinking of the family members who were slowly, cautiously, trying to rebuild bridges they'd burned. "Well," she said with a slight smile, "that's what family is for." As I turned off the lights and locked up the house that night, I thought about the conversation that had started it all. Clarissa's declaration that I didn't count, that I wasn't really family, that I shouldn't inherit equally. She'd been wrong about almost everything, but in one sense, she'd been right. I wasn't the same person who'd sat quietly at that dinner table 8 months ago. I was Harold Thornfield's daughter, his chosen successor, and the guardian of his legacy. But more than that, I was someone who'd learned that true family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who's willing to share your burdens, your hopes, and your Sunday dinners, even when the conversation gets difficult. The letter had given me an inheritance, but the confrontation had given me something more valuable, the knowledge of who I really was and who I wanted to become.
I am Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. Regret filled me as I wished I could have shown him his grandchildren. The words escaped my lips along with a sigh. I got married 5 years ago, at the age of 25. At my wedding, my father and I made a promise. I'll let you know first when I get pregnant. However, that promise remained unfulfilled, and it became my only regret about my father. His illness was discovered a year ago, and since then, I did everything I could for him. I regularly returned to my parents' home, visited the hospital with my mother, and increased the frequency of phone calls and video chats. Despite my efforts, I couldn't help but wonder if I could have done more. As I muttered these thoughts, my mother, sitting next to me, reassured me, saying, "You did well, Chelsea. Your father would be satisfied." Just then, my sister Portia returned, bringing the lawyer with her. My sister entered the living room, accompanied by a man in his mid-40s, whom I assumed was the lawyer. He handed me his business card, introducing himself as Samuel, the attorney. Gratefully, I acknowledged his presence, and my mother guided him to his seat. As soon as the lawyer sat down, my sister blurted out, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance." I quickly clarified, "It's not all for you, Portia." An uneasy tension filled the room as my sister glared at me, revealing our strained relationship. We used to be okay, but things soured when we found out about Dad's illness. Despite my attempts to bridge the gap, my sister's arrogant attitude and reluctance to visit our father only worsened our relationship. I expressed my frustration, but she insisted, "I'm not being stubborn. I live in the city, and it's not easy to come to the countryside." Our argument continued, and I realized that our relationship had deteriorated quickly. Even though she lived far away, I believed she could have visited once in a while. In the end, she stopped talking, and the tension hung in the air. Attempting to diffuse the situation, the lawyer intervened, saying, "Let's calm down, please." I apologized, and the lawyer nodded before continuing. "As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will." My mother inquired, "When did this happen?" The lawyer replied, "A few weeks before he passed away." He contacted me, so I went to the hospital to have him sign the will in front of me, with his primary physician present. It turned out they had arranged for the primary physician to contact the lawyer. After my father passed away, the lawyer was contacted. He, in turn, reached out to us, explaining the circumstances. "That's how we find ourselves here today," the lawyer said, producing a white envelope and placing it in front of us. Inspecting the envelope, I mumbled, "This is definitely Dad's handwriting." My sister Portia seemed impatient, saying, "Never mind, just tell us what's in it. I'm busy, you know." The lawyer, with a wry smile, opened the envelope to reveal a single piece of paper. "This is what was written there," he began, explaining that besides the house and land, our father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. The mention of the storage shed puzzled me. My sister, however, interrupted angrily. "Wait a minute. You didn't mention the farm." "The farm, yes," I added, recalling that it was a hobby my father took up after closing his company. He had started farming near our home until he fell ill. My sister insisted that the farm should be part of the inheritance. Reviewing the documents, the lawyer found a note and revealed, "The farm is rented land." Disappointed, my sister thought we owned it, but I silently considered it might be for the best since we knew little about farming. The conversation shifted to dividing the inheritance. "The house and land go to the wife," the lawyer declared. My sister was content, but the lawyer suggested dividing the rest as we pleased. My sister promptly claimed the cash from the savings, approximately $100,000. Protesting against this selfish arrangement, I objected. "Wait a minute. I'm the oldest daughter. That's irrelevant. I'll take the storage shed." My sister turned to the lawyer, asking, "What even is that?" The lawyer explained, "It's the storage shed next to the house. You'll inherit the building, the land, and its contents." My sister's eyes lit up, and she eagerly accepted. As I questioned her motives, the lawyer continued, "It's about 65 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom." Reacting with distaste, my sister grimaced as the lawyer placed photos of the shed on the table. The exterior looked run down, and the interior contained only basic tools, nothing valuable. My sister declared, "I don't want it." I took the photos and painted them myself. It was all quite ordinary. Though these are sentimental items, they won't fetch much money, I thought. As I pondered, my sister spoke up, saying, "Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that dirty shed." "Hold on, that's not fair. You agreed to the vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now?" my sister retorted. It was difficult to argue against her point, but if I didn't speak up, she'd take all of Dad's inheritance. My sister pressed me, asking, "So we're good then?" Struggling to answer, my mother chimed in, "As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections." My sister grinned, and it seemed settled. However, feeling uneasy, I immediately objected, saying, "Well, I'm not satisfied." "Give it up. You're so greedy, aren't you?" my sister remarked, calling me a hassle. Frustrated, I insisted, "That's not it. You care more about Dad than money, right?" Her words left me speechless, realizing that family is more important than money. Before I could say more, my sister ended the conversation. In the end, my mother got the house and land. My sister received Dad's savings, and all that was left for me was the dirty shed. My sister signed a document promising not to complain about the inheritance division, laughing loudly. Full of complaints, I couldn't help but vent to my mother, asking, "Mom, why didn't you help me?" She replied, "I did help you. You decided with Portia." I argued, "That's not true. I made sure you got the shed." My mother assured me, "You might find something surprisingly good if you look closely." The next day, armed with the key from the lawyer, I headed to the shed near the field, a 10-minute walk from home. It was a rural road where no one else passed by. Upon reaching the field, which my father had rented for the past year, I opened the dusty shed with the key. As I looked around, there was nothing special inside, just tools for farming. Disappointed, I mumbled, "Maybe I should just take what's inside for now." However, upon closer inspection, I noticed that the shed felt smaller from the inside than it appeared from the outside. Puzzled, I walked around to the back and discovered another door. Gasping, I realized there was a space accessible only from the back. Excited, I thought this must be Dad's surprise. Remembering his love for surprises, I began tearing up. Rummaging through the shed, I found 2 keys hidden in the handle of a shovel. Trying one in the back door, it clicked open. Inside the cramped space, a large safe stood alone. Recognizing it from Dad's company, I hugged the safe, feeling fulfilled. Thinking that there had to be more surprises, I inserted the second key into the safe. With a slightly rusty sound, the safe opened, revealing contents that left me in disbelief. I was stunned. Inside was an unexpected inheritance. Overwhelmed with thoughts, I realized I had to tell Mom. Locking the safe, I rushed to her and, after explaining the situation, called my husband. Together, we moved the safe from my parents' house. However, a realization hit me. The contents were undoubtedly Dad's. If it's part of my inheritance, including the shed, I might have to pay inheritance tax. Better get this thoroughly checked out. The valuable contents warranted consultation with the lawyer about inheritance tax. According to the lawyer, consulting a certified public accountant was advised. A friend referred me to an accountant, and I left the complicated matters in their capable hands. A year passed in this way, and just when I thought things had settled down, my sister showed up near my home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" I asked. "Well, I had some business at our parents' house, so I stopped by." "Something like that," my sister replied. Her behavior struck me as odd. Despite the proximity of our homes, we weren't the kind of sisters who would casually visit, especially after the tension over Dad's inheritance. Suspicion lingered as I looked at her. Acting a bit nervous, my sister asked, "Can I come in?" I agreed, but her visit was unusual. After serving coffee, she started fidgeting and finally spoke. "So, did you win the lottery or something?" I shook my head in confusion. "No, I didn't." "Did your husband get a bonus?" I replied, "I never buy lottery tickets, and my husband's bonus isn't due now." "What are you talking about?" Angrily, she exclaimed. "What are you making fun of me for? Money, you had it, don't you?" She excitedly shared a story from a few days ago when she ran into our aunt in the city. The aunt mentioned receiving a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting Dad. My sister assumed I sent it and believed I had come into extra money. She interrogated me, insisting that I admit to a windfall. Sighing, I clarified. It was a thank you gift from the inheritance. My sister didn't like my attitude and accused me of mocking her. I explained, no, it was a genuine thank you gift, but she pressed, demanding to know where I got the money. I replied, from the inheritance, remember? So, I sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us. Upon hearing this, my sister frowned and remarked, all you got was that dirty shed. I nodded, confirming her statement, but then added, there was a safe inside it. That's where the real inheritance was. Perplexed, my sister questioned, a safe? Real inheritance? I carefully explained to her about the watches in the safe, all of them valuable and collected by our father as a hobby during his lifetime. However, I admitted not knowing their exact value. On the other hand, the remaining savings were about $100,000, which seemed small considering our father's background as a business owner who could retire early. This led me to believe he might have invested a significant amount in those watches. My mother, upon seeing the contents of the safe, had expressed concern about potential inheritance tax. Seeking guidance, I asked her, what should I do, Mom? After some thought, she advised, things like this always come out. You should declare it properly. Let's ask that lawyer we spoke to recently. I consulted the lawyer again, who explained that if you inherit valuables, the inheritance tax is determined by their value at that time. He also suggested that a certified public accountant could handle it for me. Following this advice, I left it to the accountant. The results revealed that the watches alone were worth at least $500,000. Faced with this valuation, I questioned, how should I pay the inheritance tax? The accountant suggested, how about keeping the ones you're emotionally attached to and selling the rest? Agreeing with the practicality of this approach, I sold some watches, used the money to pay the inheritance tax, and sent thank you gifts to the helpful relatives, the gift cards my sister had mentioned. By the way, I kept items like the pocket watch my father often wore, which held the most memories for me. I showed it to my sister while explaining the story, saying, this one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me. However, my sister frowned upon hearing my story. What? You don't have any left? She asked. I replied, no, there are still some in the safe, which is at Mom's. It's too big for this house. It's the one Dad used at his company. My sister looked away, seeming deep in thought. Feeling uneasy, I anticipated her reaction, but she surprised me by standing up and saying, I'm leaving now that I know where the money came from, and left. Considering my sister's money-minded nature, I expected her to demand a share of the money from the watch sales. I was relieved she left without making a fuss. However, in my relief, I forgot the unease I had felt earlier, only to be reminded of it late that night when I received a call from my mother. Chelsea, it's urgent. Come over right away, my mother exclaimed. Alarmed, my husband and I rushed to her house, noticing something strange as we approached. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red, and as we got closer, several police cars were parked outside. What's going on? I wondered, and the reason became clear, a distressing situation unfolding at my parents' house. I navigated through the crowd, calling out to my mother, what happened, Mom? According to her, it was after 9 p.m., and feeling tired, she had already gone to bed. Shortly afterward, she heard strange noises, sounds like someone searching for something coming from beyond the door. Oh, it's a burglar, my mother instantly thought. Feeling helpless as she was alone in the house, she decided to escape through the window. Glancing back, she saw the light of a flashlight moving inside the house, confirming her suspicion of a burglar. Convinced, she ran to the neighbor's house and urgently sought help, saying, there's a burglar. Upon hearing this, the neighbor promptly came out, and they both observed the swinging light my mother pointed at, thinking it was a burglar. They called the police, who arrived soon after. However, it turned out not to be a burglar at all. It was my sister who had sneaked into the house to rummage through the safe, influenced by my story. Neither my mother nor the neighbor knew this. When the police arrived, my sister, realizing she was in trouble, attempted to make a quick escape. In her rush, she accidentally bumped into the open door of the safe, causing it to topple over and fall onto her as she tried to flee. That's how Portia got trapped under the safe, and she was taken to the hospital by ambulance, complaining of leg pain. Stunned, I was truly dumbfounded by the turn of events. Afterward, my mother and I apologized to the police officers for the late-night disturbance. I also called my sister's husband, who expressed disbelief, exclaiming, "Wait, you're saying Portia broke into her own family home and got injured?" "Yes, that's correct," I replied, shocked and disappointed. Her husband revealed that Portia had accumulated a significant amount of debt, spending extravagantly on brand-name items. The couple had a massive fight, leading Portia to storm out, declaring she would borrow from Mom to pay it back. It turned out she had already used the $100,000 she inherited to settle some of her debts. However, still short, she came to me, seeking more money. Learning about the contents of the safe triggered her actions, resulting in this entire mess. No wonder her husband was furious. In the end, my sister, with a fractured leg, was hospitalized, and her husband started talking about divorce. Despite her protests, he brought divorce papers to the hospital, and she had no choice but to sign. Now she lies in her hospital bed, stunned by the unfolding events. I noticed a part-time job magazine next to her, suggesting she's contemplating working part-time to pay off her debts. As for me, I decided to move back to my parents' home amid all the commotion. Concerned about my mother and another significant reason, I found out I'm pregnant. After discussing it with my husband, we decided to move back home and have my mother assist us with childcare. Although I wish I could have shared the news of my pregnancy with my father while he was alive, I'm certain he would be happy for us. So, I'm looking forward to giving birth to a healthy baby.
The boardroom at Nexus Dynamics had always felt too cold. Maybe it was the steel and glass design. Or maybe it was just the ice in my sister Victoria's voice as she stood at the head of the table, perfectly manicured finger pointing in my direction. "Look at these numbers," she continued, clicking through slides I'd never seen before. Project delays, budget overruns, critical system failures, all under Amanda's supervision. She's incompetent, and she's dragging this company down. I sat quietly, watching the faces around the table. Most wouldn't meet my eyes. These were people I'd worked with for 8 years, people who'd celebrated my promotions, attended my project launches. Now they studied their tablets or stared at their water glasses, anywhere but at me. "The new platform launch is in 2 weeks," Victoria pressed, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood as she paced. "We can't afford another failure, not with the investors watching." I almost smiled at that. If only she knew about the patent, about the careful preparations I'd made when I first suspected she was plotting against me. But Victoria had always seen what she wanted to see. Her quiet, plotting older sister, too focused on code to play office politics. Amanda, Harrison Wells, the board chairman, finally spoke. "These accusations are serious. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I thought about the real numbers, safely encrypted on my private server, about the actual reason for the delays. Victoria's team repeatedly changing specifications, demanding impossible deadlines, setting up failure after failure. "No," I said simply, closing my laptop. I think Victoria has made her position clear. Victoria's perfect eyebrows rose slightly. She'd expected a fight, wanted one probably. It would have fit her narrative. The emotional, unstable sister who couldn't handle pressure. "Well then," Harrison sighed, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Given the evidence presented, and with the critical launch period approaching, the board has decided immediate action is necessary. Amanda, We're terminating your position as Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. I nodded once, standing slowly. I understand. I'll clear out my office. That's it? Victoria's voice held a note of disappointment. No protests. No excuses. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The Channel soup that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The cold ambition in her eyes that matched our mother's. The slight smile playing at her lips as she watched me fall. What would be the point? I asked quietly. You've clearly made up your mind. I gathered my things with careful precision, feeling the weight of the thumb drive in my pocket. The one containing proof of what I'd actually been doing these past 8 years. Building not just a platform, but a fortress. One that Victoria, in her rush to push me out, hadn't bothered to understand. The walk to my office was silent. Employees quickly looked away as I passed. News of my firing already spreading through the corporate grapevine. I didn't blame them for their silence. Victoria had made it clear what happened to people who stood against her. My office, with its view of the city skyline, had been my home for nearly a decade. Pictures of project launches, team celebrations, the first prototype of what would become our core system, all carefully packed into a cardboard box. Sarah, my assistant, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. Security's coming up. Victoria's orders. Of course she did, I murmured, pulling a sealed envelope from my desk drawer. Can you make sure this gets to Harrison? After I'm gone. She took it, tucking it into her blazer. What's going to happen now? I smiled, thinking about the patent documents safely filed with my lawyers. About the kill switch built into the system's core architecture. About Victoria's precious launch, scheduled for exactly 2 weeks from today. Now, I picked up my box. Now we wait. Security escorted me to the lobby, past whispers and stares. Victoria watched from the executive floor balcony, triumph written across her features. She thought she'd won. She thought it was over. She had no idea it was just beginning. At home, not the modest apartment listed in my HR file, but the penthouse I'd bought when I first filed the patent. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. A message from my lawyer was waiting. Everything's in place. They won't know what hit them. I thought back to how it all started, 8 years ago when Victoria and I had joined Nexus Dynamics together. She'd taken the management track, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. I'd chosen technology, losing myself in code while she climbed the corporate ladder. What she never understood was that I'd been climbing too, just differently. While she collected allies and manipulated office politics, I'd been building something revolutionary. The platform that now powered not just Nexus Dynamics, but half their client companies as well. A platform I'd patented in my own name, through a separate holding company, long before Victoria started plotting my removal. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, my team's lead developer. V's already reorganizing everything, telling everyone the launch will fix all our technical issues. Should we warn them? No, I typed back. Let them figure it out the hard way. I walked to my home office, where a wall of monitors displayed the system's core metrics. Everything looked normal, on the surface. But beneath the clean interface and smooth operations lay a carefully crafted maze of dependencies and fail-safes. Victoria thought she was launching a new version of our platform. What she didn't know was that every critical function, every key feature, was tied to my original architecture that would require patent holder approval, my approval, for any significant changes. Another message, this time from Sarah. Harrison read the envelope. Called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. V's furious. I smiled, imagining my sister's reaction to the preliminary audit I'd included. The real numbers showing how her team had sabotaged project after project, trying to make me look incompetent. But that was just the appetizer. The main course would come with the launch. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of corporate announcements. Victoria gave interviews about Nexus Dynamics' exciting new direction. The stock price rose on promises of revolutionary updates to the platform. My name was carefully erased from company materials, my contributions attributed to the team. I watched it all from my penthouse office, monitoring system metrics and handling quiet inquiries from my patent attorneys. A few board members tried to contact me, probably finally reading the fine print on the system documentation. I didn't respond. Let them sweat. The night before the launch, I received an unexpected visitor. Mother, elegant as always and dire, standing at my door with a familiar look of disappointment. Amanda, she sighed, pushing past me into the penthouse. What are you doing? Victoria says you're threatening the company with some ridiculous patent claim. I let her take in the space. The high-end furniture, the wall of technology, the view that spoke of success she'd never acknowledged. Not threatening, I corrected quietly, protecting my intellectual property. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Don't be difficult. You know Victoria deserves this opportunity. She understands business, leadership. You've always been too technical. I thought about tomorrow, about what would happen when Victoria tried to launch her improved version of my system, about how being too technical was about to change everything. Maybe, I said, showing her to the door. We'll see tomorrow, won't we? As security let her out, I turned back to my monitors. Everything was in place. In less than 12 hours, Victoria would learn the true cost of underestimating her technical sister. I slept surprisingly well that night, waking to dozens of messages about the launch preparations. Nexus Dynamics stock was up 15% in pre-market trading, riding high on Victoria's promises of revolutionary changes. Sarah kept me updated. Conference rooms packed. Press, investors, full board. V's wearing white. Says it's for a fresh start. I smiled, checking the time. In exactly 1 hour, my sister would learn what a fresh start really meant. Marcus sent me the launch livestream link. I settled into my office chair, wine glass in hand, and prepared to watch the show. Ready? He messaged. Born ready, I replied, clicking play. Victoria appeared on screen, resplendent in white Alexander McQueen, confidence radiating from every pore. Behind her, a massive display showed the platform's interface, my interface, though my name was nowhere to be seen. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, welcome to the future of Nexus Dynamics. I took a sip of wine and smiled. The future was coming, all right, just not the one she had in mind. Victoria's voice flowed smoothly through my speakers, practiced and polished. Today marks a new era for Nexus Dynamics. Our enhanced platform represents months of innovative development, streamlined architecture, and I glanced at the time. 10:59 a.m. In exactly 1 minute, the system would attempt to validate the launch protocols against the patent registry. In exactly 1 minute, Victoria's perfect world would crash around her designer heels. Let me demonstrate the revolutionary changes we've implemented, she continued, tapping the presentation screen with manicured confidence. As you can see, the screen flickered once, then went dark. Victoria tapped again, her smile faltering slightly. Nothing happened. Minor technical difficulty, she said smoothly, but I could see the panic beginning to bloom in her eyes. If we could just. Every monitor in the conference room suddenly lit up with the same message. Lounge chase CQNC tier mine ATD PTNT VALIDAKION FAILED OWAR APROVA REQIRECONTACT Amanda BNATT PATENT Holder. The room erupted in whispers. Through the live stream, I watched Victoria's face drain of color as she read the message, as understanding finally dawned. What is this? Harrison Wells stood up, his voice sharp with alarm. Victoria, explain. But Victoria was frozen, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. In a way, it had. My phone buzzed. Sarah sending updates from inside the room. Board members pulling up patent documents on their tablets. Investors asking questions. Fee looks like she's about to faint. I took another sip of wine, watching the chaos unfold. Then my screen lit up with an incoming video call from Harrison Wells himself. I let it ring twice before answering. Amanda, he said, his face tight with controlled panic. We need to talk. Yes, I agreed calmly. We do. The conference room. Now. I smiled. No, Harrison. My office. The penthouse at the Sterling. 30 minutes. He started to protest, but I cut him off. 30 minutes, or I'll start responding to the reporters who are undoubtedly calling about the failed launch. 28 minutes later, my elevator opened. Harrison Wells led the procession, looking significantly less composed than usual, followed by 3 board members, our chief legal counsel, and Victoria, her white suit now slightly crumpled, her perfect mask cracking. Welcome, I said from my position behind a massive desk they didn't know I owned. Please, sit. Victoria's eyes darted around the space, taking in the luxury she hadn't known I could afford. How? She started. How did I afford this? I finished for her. The same way I afforded the patent attorneys. The same way I afforded the private development team that helped build the original system. Success leaves clues, Victoria. You just never bothered to look for them. Harrison cleared his throat. Amanda, we've reviewed the patent documentation. It appears there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I corrected, sliding copies of the patent registration across the desk. Just willful ignorance. Victoria was so busy trying to push me out that she never checked who actually owned the intellectual property she was planning to enhance. Victoria's face flushed. You deliberately hid this from me. Did I? I pulled up emails on my monitor, displaying them on the wall screen. Here's me 3 years ago, explaining the patent strategy to the board. Here's the documentation in the system architecture files. Here's the validation protocol that your team ignored when they started making changes. The chief legal counsel, Barbara Chen, leaned forward. The patent is ironclad, and the system dependencies are exactly as I designed them. I finished. Every critical function, every core feature requires patent holder validation for significant changes. Victoria's enhanced version? It's trying to modify protected architecture without approval. You're holding the company hostage. Victoria burst out. I turned to her slowly. No, sister dear. I'm protecting my intellectual property. The same property you've been taking credit for while plotting to push me out. I pulled up another document. The real numbers I'd been tracking, showing how Victoria's team had systematically sabotaged projects to make me look incompetent. Interesting pattern, isn't it? I observed as the board members leaned in to study the data. Every time my team got close to completing a project, mysterious changes would be requested. Impossible deadlines would appear. Resources would vanish. Victoria's face had gone from red to white. You can't prove. Actually, Sarah's voice came from the doorway as she walked in with a thumb drive. We can. I've been documenting everything, including your late-night meetings, about getting rid of the technical dead weight. Harrison's jaw tightened as he looked between us. What do you want, Amanda? I stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. 3 things. First, a public correction regarding my contribution to the platform. Second, Victoria's immediate resignation. You can't. Victoria started. I can. I cut her off. Unless you prefer, I license the patent to our competitors. The room went silent. Everyone there understood what that would mean. Without access to my system, Nexus Dynamics would collapse within months. And third, Harrison asked quietly, I want my job back, not as CTO, as CEO. Victoria knocked over her water glass as she stood. This is ridiculous. You can't just. Sit down, Victoria, Harrison ordered, his voice tired. Your sister isn't asking, she's telling. And given the circumstances, we don't have much choice. Barbara was already pulling out her tablet. I'll draft the necessary paperwork. The board will need to vote, but given the patent situation, the vote will pass, Harrison finished. He looked at me with something like respect. You planned this all along, didn't you? Even before Victoria made her move. I smiled. I learned early that being underestimated can be an advantage. Victoria thought I was too focused on code to play politics. She was wrong. Within hours, the paperwork was signed. Victoria was escorted out by security, her white suit no longer quite so pristine. Harrison called an emergency board meeting to ratify my appointment as CEO. By evening, the press releases were going out, announcing both the leadership change and clarifying the true ownership of Nexus Dynamics core technology. Sarah found me in my new office, the one Victoria had so recently occupied, late that night. Your sister left this, she said, holding up a framed photo. It showed Victoria and me at the company's launch party 8 years ago, both smiling, both unaware of where we'd end up. Keep it, I said, as a reminder. Of what? That success doesn't always look like you expect it to. The next few weeks were a blur of transitions. The platform launch was rescheduled, this time with proper credit for its innovation. The stock price, after a brief dip, rose steadily as investors gained confidence in the new leadership. Mother called several times. I let her leave messages, each one progressively less confident, more conciliatory. Finally, I agreed to meet her for lunch. She sat across from me at an exclusive restaurant I'd chosen, looking older somehow, less certain of her world. I never understood you, she admitted after an uncomfortable silence. Victoria was so much like me, focused on appearance, on position. You were always in your own world, with your computers and code. That world, I reminded her gently, just made me CEO of a major tech company. She nodded, pushing her salad around her plate. Victoria's leaving the country. Dubai, I think. Says she needs a fresh start. Good for her. Will you ever forgive her? She asked. Us? I considered this, thinking about the years of dismissal, of being underestimated, of watching Victoria take credit for my work. "I already have," I said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or letting it happen again." A month after taking over as CEO, I called my first all-hands meeting. Standing at the podium, looking out over the employees who had once avoided my eyes in hallways, I thought about perception and reality, about quiet power and loud ambition. "Many of you knew me as the quiet CTO," I began, "the one who stayed late coding while others networked at parties. Some of you probably wondered how someone like that ended up as CEO." The room was silent, attentive. The truth is, leadership isn't about who talks the loudest or plays politics the best. It's about building something valuable and knowing how to protect it. It's about understanding that real power often works quietly, behind the scenes, waiting for the right moment to emerge. I clicked to my first slide, a patent document with my name on it. This company's future was built in lines of code, in late-night debugging sessions, in technical details that some people thought didn't matter. They were wrong, and now we're going to show them just how wrong they were. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. As I looked out over the crowd, I caught Sarah's eye. She was grinning. "Worth the wait?" she mouthed. I nodded, thinking about Victoria's face when she realized what I'd done, about the years of preparation that had led to this moment. Later that evening, as I sat in my CEO's office watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold, Marcus brought me a final piece of news. "Victoria's team," he said, trying to hide a smile. "They've all been trying to access the system documentation. Apparently, they're worried about their own projects." I laughed. "Send them the patent registration." Again. Some lessons need to be learned more than once. Because that's the thing about being underestimated. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to build carefully, to prepare thoroughly, and to wait for exactly the right moment to show your true strength. Victoria had wanted to be CEO because of the power it represented. I had become CEO because of the power I'd already built, line by line, piece by piece, while she was too busy looking down at me to see what I was creating. My phone buzzed. A message from Harrison. "Board meeting tomorrow. Quarterly numbers looking excellent. Your sister's been calling about her stock options." I smiled, remembering Victoria's words at that fatal board meeting. "She's incompetent. Fire her. Tell her to contact our patent attorneys." I typed back. "They handle all my negotiations now." Because sometimes the best response to being underestimated isn't immediate revenge. It's building something so valuable, so essential, that those who dismissed you have no choice but to face their mistake. And if that realization comes with a side of poetic justice, well, that's just good system design.
I'm Sarah, a 40-year-old mother of two, wedded to my rock, John, for almost 2 decades. Our life's been a thrilling yet challenging journey, and it's the companionship in these times that truly counts. However, things took a turn with the unexpected arrival of my younger brother Tham, a 32-year-old who's still figuring life out, often making impulsive decisions. It was a typical Sunday, with our family congregating at Mom's house, a place brimming with childhood nostalgia. As we were savoring Mom's delightful roast and her tales, Tom barged in, unexpectedly accompanied by a young, pregnant woman named Lisa, his fiancée. This sudden revelation, amidst a peaceful family lunch, caught everyone off guard. Lisa, youthful and visibly pregnant, was dressed more for a party than a family gathering. This news stunned everyone, especially my kids, Emily and Max, who were curious and bewildered by their new aunt-to-be and her sparkling attire. Tom's announcement of his engagement and impending fatherhood brought a tense silence to the room, only broken by John's attempt at congratulatory words. Tom declared their plan to stay at Mom's temporarily, which visibly worried her. It was like observing someone unwittingly edge closer to a precipice. That night, John and I discussed the situation. He expressed his concern about Tom's irresponsible behavior and the strain it was putting on my mother. The following days were chaotic, with Tom and Lisa overstepping boundaries, while Mom tirelessly catered to their needs, visibly worn down by their lack of gratitude. One evening, I found Mom in the kitchen, her fatigue evident. I'd urged her to stand up for herself, but her maternal instincts towards Tom and his unborn child made it impossible for her to turn them away. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront them, to expose their exploitation of Mom's kindness, but I restrained myself. In family dynamics, love often means overlooking the obvious faults, even when it's detrimental. This became our new reality: Tom and Lisa, the inconsiderate house guests, and the rest of us tiptoeing around to maintain harmony in a home that now seemed constricting. Our days were upended by Tom and Lisa's presence. Each morning was greeted with Lisa's loud grievances about her discomforts or cravings. She'd saunter into the kitchen, still in her nightwear, demanding breakfast without a hint of courtesy. "Sarah, whip up some pancakes, will you?" The baby's craving them, she'd order without a please. I'd clench my teeth, trying to maintain composure. "Sure, Lisa." Just after I prepare Emily and Max for school. Tom was equally unhelpful, idly lounging, his attention fixed on his laptop or video games, occasionally shouting for food without a glance our way. Mom attempted to mediate, reminding me they were young, but I couldn't overlook their blatant sense of entitlement. As Lisa's due date neared, the situation worsened. She left clutter everywhere, engaged in endless phone gossip, while dishes and laundry piled up. One day, I reached my breaking point. Finding her in the living room, feet propped on the coffee table, I confronted her. "Lisa, this isn't a hotel. You can't just expect everyone to clean up after you." Her response was a dismissive eye roll. "Chill, Sarah. I'm pregnant, remember?" Tom's defense was swift but infuriating. "Lay off her, Sarah. She's carrying my child." Mom intervened, pleading for peace, but the unfairness was glaring. She was exhausting herself for their sake, yet remained unheeded. They treated our home like a free-for-all, leaving messes and responsibilities for Mom, and even had the audacity to plan an extravagant wedding, expecting Mom to foot the bill. Their disregard for Mom's well-being became intolerable. Even after the birth of their son Alex, their behavior didn't change. One morning, I walked in to find Mom tackling a pile of dirty dishes, while Lisa idly watched TV and Tom was absorbed in his phone. I asked Mom why she was burdened with all the work, but the answer was all too familiar. The cycle of disregard and exploitation seemed endless, leaving me grappling with frustration and concern for my overburdened mother. I questioned Mom, trying to maintain composure, but her response only added to my frustration. "Lisa needs to rest, and Tom's busy," she said. Turning to Lisa, I pointed out her lack of contribution, but she retorted with the excuse of her recent childbirth. Tom, disengaged as ever, defended her, claiming ignorance of their hardships. I was incredulous at their audacity. Sitting idle and burdening Mom was their idea of being busy? Mom attempted to diffuse the tension, claiming she didn't mind the extra work, but my patience had worn thin. I'd argued that Mom was not their servant, but my words fell on deaf ears. Tom and Lisa continued their routine, frequently leaving the house, burdening Mom with their child, and flaunting their extravagant purchases. Discovering a receipt for an expensive dress, I confronted them about the financial burden they were placing on Mom. Tom's indifferent shrug and Lisa's smug attitude were infuriating. They saw nothing wrong in exploiting Mom's generosity. Alone with Mom, I pleaded with her to see the situation for what it was: exploitation. But her maternal instincts blinded her to their irresponsibility. "I can't abandon them, especially not Alex," she said. Despite my efforts to persuade her, she remained steadfast in her belief that they needed her help. Feeling helpless, I watched the family dynamic deteriorate. Tom and Lisa continued their parasitic behavior, while Mom, ever the selfless mother, couldn't recognize the extent of their exploitation. The situation reached a breaking point when Mom suddenly fell ill. One day, she was her usual self. The next, she was bedridden and weak. I stayed by her side, offering hopeful words, but inside, I felt a growing anger towards Tom and Lisa, who were conspicuously absent, likely squandering more of Mom's resources. I expressed my outrage, but Mom's response was tinged with sadness. "They have their own lives, Sarah," she said, her voice weary. Her condition worsened, and eventually, Mom passed away quietly in the night. I was there, but Tom and Lisa were absent, likely enjoying themselves, oblivious to our family's loss. The funeral was a blur, a mixture of grief and resentment towards my absent brother and his partner. Their absence during Mom's final moments and their continued disregard weighed heavily on me, underscoring the profound disconnection within our family. I recall the moment Tom and Lisa arrived at the funeral, their appearance more fitting for a celebration than a solemn occasion. Lisa's attire was notably inappropriate, drawing murmurs from the crowd. John offered me a comforting squeeze of the hand, trying to provide some support. Post-service, Tom urgently wanted to discuss Mom's will. His insistence, so soon after our loss, left me aghast. He claimed Mom had left the house to him, a statement that seemed incredibly presumptuous and insensitive given the circumstances. My protests about respecting Mom's memory fell on deaf ears. Tom was adamant about his entitlement. The following day, I visited Mom's house to gather her belongings, but I was met by Lisa's sneering face at the door. She coldly informed me that the house was now theirs, claiming Tom had inherited everything. Tom's appearance, confirming the claim with a smug grin, sparked a mixture of anger and disbelief in me. I felt alienated, standing at the threshold of my childhood home, now claimed by my callous brother and his wife. Determined to seek justice, I found myself nervously entering the notary's office. The whole ordeal, grappling with Mom's loss, and now this dispute with Tom, seemed like a nightmare. Mr. Jacobs, the notary and an old family friend, greeted me with a solemn expression. As I voiced my doubts about Tom's claim, Tom and Lisa arrived, exuding arrogance. Mr. Jacobs began reading the will, and my anxiety peaked. When he reached the part about Tom, he announced a bequest of only $5,000 to him, a revelation that visibly shocked Tom. Mr. Jacobs then continued, to my relief and surprise, declaring that Mom had left the family home and the remainder of her estate to me. This unexpected turn of events was a small solace in the midst of our family strife, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the grief and turmoil that had enveloped us since Mom's passing. The revelation in Mr. Jacobs' office left me feeling a mix of relief and vindication. Lisa, on the other hand, was incensed, incredulous at the idea that they weren't left the house. Mr. Jacobs informed us that Mom had made this last will only a month ago, due to her concerns about being pressured by certain family members. Tom's reaction was one of rage and denial, but there was a sense of justice in the air. Mom had seen through their exploitation. Tom accused me of turning Mom against him, while Lisa threatened legal action. Mr. Jacobs warned them about the possible legal repercussions if coercion was proven in any earlier will. Their confidence seemed to falter at this. As Tom and Lisa left the notary's office in a huff, I stayed behind to express my gratitude to Mr. Jacobs. I left feeling a whirlwind of emotions, sorrow for losing Mom, relief that her final wishes were honored, and anger at Tom and Lisa's audacity. Back at the house, Tom confronted me, infuriated by the disparity in our inheritance. I tried to explain that this was Mom's decision, likely influenced by their continuous financial demands. His frustration was palpable as he demanded to know why Mom would screw him over like this. Then I found Mom's letter, tucked away in a drawer. It explained everything. Mom had initially set aside an equal share for both of us, but as Tom and Lisa's demands increased, she began to deduct from his portion. By the time she wrote her last will, Tom had already received most of his share through these advances. Tom was shocked and in denial, unable to accept that his actions had led to this outcome. I was firm, my patience thinning, as I confronted him with the reality of the situation. He sat, overwhelmed by his own actions, pondering the gravity of what he had done. The weight of his choices and their impact on Mom's final decisions was a harsh reality he now had to face. As I set the letter down, a blend of pity and frustration washed over me. "You've only yourself to blame, Tom. This was your doing," I said, watching him leave the house, a shadow of the man he once was. There was a sense of justice in his departure, but it was tinged with sadness for a family now fractured by both grief and selfishness. The house, previously a battleground of family conflicts, now stood in a haunting silence. Tom and Lisa had left, severing all ties with me. It was a relief to be freed from their tumult, yet it also left me to grapple with the fallout of their actions. As I sat in the living room, lost in thought, my phone rang. It was Jenna, bringing news of Tom. He was job hunting in town, and Lisa seemed to be living a single life, with no sign of their son, Alex. Anger surged within me at their reckless disregard for their child. Jenna's voice broke through my fury, suggesting that maybe there was something I could do. Her words ignited a spark of determination in me. I had to fight for Alex. He deserved a better life. The next day, I met with a lawyer, Ms. Rivera, a straightforward and determined woman. I laid out my case, my resolve firm. "I want to pursue custody of Alex. He's in a toxic environment," I told her. Ms. Rivera, sizing up the situation, agreed to help, though she warned it wouldn't be easy. The ensuing legal battle was arduous, with Tom and Lisa oscillating between cooperation and hostility. But I remained steadfast. John's support was unwavering, his arms a haven of comfort after each challenging day in court. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. It's hard but necessary," he reassured me. The day I was granted temporary custody of Alex was filled with mixed emotions. He was a sweet, bewildered boy, but gradually he began to adapt to our family. Emily and Max quickly grew fond of him, and he brought a new joy into our home. Tom's reaction was one of anger and resignation. "You've taken everything, Sarah," he accused. I stood firm, knowing I was protecting Alex, a responsibility Tom had neglected. As Tom walked away, I realized our relationship might never recover, but this was about Alex's well-being, not our sibling rivalry. With Alex, life took on a new dimension. There were challenges, of course, but also moments of laughter and love. He was slowly becoming a part of our family, and I was resolute in making his presence permanent. Looking back, I knew despite the hardships and challenges, we were building a brighter future, one filled with hope and the love of a family reunited under new circumstances. Making the decision to bring Alex into our family was undeniably the right choice. It marked a new chapter for us, an opportunity to heal, grow, and foster a future brimming with love and stability. This was the legacy I yearned to create, a vivid departure from the selfishness and discord that once loomed over us. Our home, once a symbol of family strife, was now alive with laughter and the joyful sounds of children. Alex had seamlessly integrated into our lives, his presence a beacon of happiness. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, his innocent question about staying with us forever warmed my heart. "Yes, Alex, you're part of our family now," I assured him, and his contented smile was all the confirmation I needed. John, standing by the door, shared a look of pride and fulfillment. "He's really fitting in," he observed, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. We were providing Alex with the life he deserved. The next day brought the exhilarating news. The court had granted me full custody of Alex. Overwhelmed with emotion, I thanked Miss Rivera profusely. The family's reaction to the news was a beautiful sight. Emily and Max embraced Alex, and even John was visibly moved. "We're a complete family now," he said, voice laden with emotion. The journey had been tumultuous, but it strengthened us. While I occasionally thought of Tom and Lisa, hoping they would find their path, my priority was our children and our family. In the following months, Alex flourished, transforming from a timid child into one filled with confidence and joy. One day, while playing in the garden, he presented me with a dandelion, proudly announcing his wish for us to be together forever. Holding him close, I assured him that his wish had indeed come true. Looking around at my family, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. We had navigated through the storm and emerged more robust. Our future was a canvas of hope, love, and endless possibilities. This was our story, a testament to the resilience of family and the transformative power of love. It was a future bright with promise, and we were more than ready to embrace it wholeheartedly. Henceforth, my brother and his wife declared, "We'll manage the household independently, so find another place to live." My mother, aligning herself with their decision, treated me as an impediment. Do they comprehend who has been footing the bills for the house? I never anticipated such disrespect. In the recesses of my mind, I resolved to take certain actions. I go by the name Carrie, a 30-year-old woman. Currently, I reside in my parents' home after returning from college. Initially, I ventured into the corporate world to forge my path, but the challenges overwhelmed me, prompting my return home. While initially navigating unemployment, I explored work-from-home opportunities. Armed with a scientific background, I embarked on a freelance engineering career. Commencing with modest projects, the income was meager, yet the experience of working independently was profoundly meaningful. In stark contrast to conventional employment, I could generate ample income without excessive social interaction. As my confidence grew, so did my workload and earnings. Within a year, my income rivaled that of a regular corporate employee. However, the predicament lay in my parents' understanding, especially my mother's reluctance to embrace my work-from-home lifestyle. My father grasped my explanation, but my mother, rooted in traditional beliefs, harbored apprehensions about what she couldn't fathom. Despite my earnest attempts to elucidate, my mother persisted with questions like, "How long do you plan on staying home?" and insinuations about the legitimacy of my online work. Despite presenting evidence of client emails and salary statements, my mother remained unconvinced. She suspected it to be some shady business or involvement in a dubious religion, despite the consistent payments and the legitimacy of my job. Despite my detailed explanations, my mother remained steadfast in her skepticism. She continually expressed concerns about the possibility of relying on unemployment benefits, emphasizing their impermanence. Although I had contemplated living independently, my savings were not yet sufficient. Around that time, my father's health took a toll, with deteriorating legs and back, necessitating nursing care. Facing an early retirement and sudden income loss, my father assured me that his pension would suffice. However, acknowledging my mother's spending habits, I questioned his ability to manage. His face wore the fatigue of anxiety about the uncertain future. My father had supported me through college, and even when I returned home due to mental health challenges. The idea of leaving him alone and continuing to live independently troubled me. My mother, too, grappled with confusion over my father's sudden condition. Contemplating the situation, I felt a sense of responsibility and a desire to give back. Reassuring my father, I pledged to support the family from that point onward. He expressed surprise, doubting my income's adequacy, but I confidently showed him my stable financial situation. Grasping the reality, my father, who had always understood my circumstances, was taken aback by my newfound stability. Encouraged by his understanding, I offered to help with household expenses, medical bills, and other financial obligations. Each month, I transferred a certain amount to my father's bank account, shouldering a significant part of the financial burden. As my mother had been using my father's credit card, I created a new main card and provided her with a supplementary card. My father, mindful of saving money, urged my mother to follow suit. In response, my mother questioned whether I should be asked to leave the house. I pointed out my financial contributions and emphasized that it would be more challenging without my support. Skeptical, my mother remained unconvinced and suspicious of my assistance. It took my father's persuasion to finally gain her agreement, allowing me to continue living with them. Continuing my work and household responsibilities, I found my mother increasingly taking my assistance for granted. Her strictness intensified, with constant remarks about the speed of my chores. "Can't you finish your chores faster?" she would complain. I explained the challenge of multitasking while working, but she dismissed my concerns. The strain on my relationship with her became apparent, and it seemed irreparable. In contrast, my father, understanding my efforts, provided much-needed support. Despite this strained dynamic, we persevered in this manner for a year. After a year, my father's health took a sudden downturn, requiring hospitalization. Visiting him daily, I shared moments of concern and reassurance. Aware of the strain on me, my father expressed gratitude, acknowledging the difficulties in my relationship with my mother. As my father grappled with health issues, the already strained relationship between my mother and me deteriorated further. Despite feeling suffocated at times, I remained committed to supporting my family. Recollections of my mother's past efforts, especially during my student days, kept me steadfast in this commitment. However, a significant shift occurred when my mother welcomed my brother Kevin and his wife Mary. Their unexpected arrival brought an abrupt change to my living situation. My brother explained their decision, stating they would be living in the house from now on to ease the burden on me. I was taken aback, and my mother seemed to avoid eye contact. While my brother and his wife claimed their intention was to support me, a hidden meaning lingered in their words. My mother, expressing gratitude, subtly hinted at my need to contribute more to the household. Despite the surprise, I learned that my brother, a graduate of a prestigious college, had joined a reputable company. The unexpected turn of events left me questioning the true motives behind my brother and his wife's presence in our home. Certainly, he must have been earning a substantial salary, but I too was diligently pursuing my own endeavors. I wondered if they could manage without my contributions. Transitioning into a new life at home with my brother and his wife proved to be more demanding than anticipated. "Wake up, Perry, make breakfast," my brother's wife hollered, banging on my door. Fully awake and already engrossed in my work as a morning person, I explained that I was already up and working. Despite my work commitments, they insisted that I prepare breakfast. "Get on with it and get breakfast ready," she demanded. I reluctantly forced myself to assist, considering our family's usual morning freedom. Typically, we enjoyed meals at our own pace, especially when my mother and brother's wife were present. I presumed it was customary for the wife to prepare breakfast for her husband. However, my sister-in-law insisted on cooperation, and I reluctantly joined them in the kitchen. Despite my efforts, their dissatisfaction was evident. "Is this what you prepared for breakfast?" "This isn't enough," they complained. I had meticulously crafted a breakfast plate featuring soft scrambled eggs, a refreshing lettuce salad, fresh buttered toast, and a succulent sausage, thinking it would be well received. However, it seemed I had missed something. "You don't have to eat it," I retorted. But their surprise was palpable. Their reaction turned confrontational, questioning my attitude and who I thought I was. My brother, often condescending, mocked me, likely influenced by our mother. Despite explaining my work commitments, they dismissed it. "What kind of work is that? Are you crazy?" they exclaimed. Frustrated by their lack of understanding and the impact on my work, I packed my laptop, ignored their protests, and left the house. As I departed, my brother's voice echoed in the background, demanding to know where I was going. Ignoring the question, I proceeded to my father's hospital room. As I hurried into my father's hospital room, his surprised gaze met mine. "Carrie, what's wrong?" "You seem flustered," he observed. I recounted the recent incident, and my father, wearing a surprised expression, responded, "I didn't know they were. I'm sorry, Carrie. Don't worry about it. You can choose your own way of life." Feeling lost, I expressed concern that my mother might feel more comfortable if my brother Kevin were at home. However, my father reassured me, "You don't need to be in a place where you don't feel comfortable." All I want is for you to live happily. Live your life the way you want to live. Encouraged by my father's words, I decided to leave home. Upon returning that evening, I encountered a tense scene resembling a movie. The serious faces of my mother, brother, and sister-in-law greeted me. My brother accused me of not being at work, forcing him to take the day off. I inwardly questioned the responsibility of easily taking time off work. Their voices escalated, culminating in my brother demanding, "Get out of here. From now on, the three of us will live together. If you don't want to stay, please leave. We don't need an overbearing presence like you to support us." It was a shocking statement, and I replied in surprise. Why? Ignoring my protests, my brother and his wife insisted on my departure, declaring that I was no longer needed in the absence of our father. My mother, aligning with their sentiments, regarded me as a hindrance. The frustration intensified as they dismissed my involvement in the family's finances and prioritized their own concerns. Enraged by their insensitivity, I devised a plan. Initially, I transferred the money linked to the credit card my mother used daily to another account under my management. This subtle move aimed to surprise my mother when she could no longer access her credit card. I initiated a money transfer from my father's account, a crucial pillar supporting the family's financial stability. However, I ensured that only my father's medical expenses could be withdrawn from this separate account, unbeknownst to my mother. Consequently, a significant financial burden now rested on my brother and his wife. Though unaware of the intricate details of my brother's income, I was certain that he would feel the weight more than ever. After completing the necessary formalities, I gathered my belongings and declared my departure, saying, "I'm leaving this place." To my surprise, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law, who had been relentlessly harassing me, looked taken aback. Their astonishment revealed that they hadn't anticipated my decisive action, although, from the expressions on their faces, it seemed they were secretly enjoying the moment. As I announced my departure, they belittled me, expressing their relief. "You're finally leaving. We've never dealt with such a troublesome person. You're not coming back, are you?" In response, I asserted, "Of course not. Don't contact me." They smiled as I left the house, but I couldn't help but wonder what they would think after I had left. Embarking on a new life in a tranquil environment, I found solace and the freedom to enjoy my own time. Refreshed and focused, I immersed myself in my work. However, as expected, a call from my brother disrupted the peace. "I told you not to contact me. What's wrong?" I questioned. His voice conveyed surprise and urgency as he inquired about my involvement in the family's financial transactions. Confirming my role, I reminded him that I had mentioned my work several times, but neither he nor our mother had believed me. Expressing confusion, he admitted, "Well, Mom said a lot of things, and I was a little confused." Acknowledging that it wasn't my fault, he revealed a financial predicament. With my absence, they struggled to manage expenses, and my mother's spending had exacerbated the situation. Though sympathetic, I asserted, "I was able to support you in many ways because I was at home. I'm not there anymore, so you have to handle it, Carrie." I found myself in an unexpected situation when my brother contacted me, urgently requesting assistance in transferring money to his bank account. Perplexed, I asked if he was joking, given that he worked for a sizable company. However, to my surprise, my brother confessed that he had been fired from his job due to a significant mistake. His revelation left me speechless, and I realized that he might have returned to our parents' house assuming there was enough money available. Perhaps he relied on the notion of a stable pension following our father's retirement. Wanting to enlighten my brother about my financial contributions to the household, I found amusement in the thought of his astonishment upon learning the truth. His wife and my mother joined the plea for financial aid, claiming they were on the verge of running out of savings. My mother even revealed that my father refused to contribute to household finances any longer. In response, I firmly declared that I had supported them enough, urging them to work hard and support themselves. I severed communication, emphasizing my decision to distance myself from their financial struggles. My father, recognizing the strain in his relationship with my mother, consulted a lawyer and opted for a quieter life in a different place. While I continued to visit my father daily, a friend shared my brother's recent struggles. He had moved into a modest apartment, leading a frugal life. My mother, once a homemaker, faced challenges in her sudden job, while my brother found it difficult to adapt to the opinions of younger colleagues. Despite his wife's efforts, she succumbed to the pressure and departed, leaving my brother and mother to navigate their challenges together. Concerns lingered for my mother, who maintained her habit of overspending, accumulating debts. However, I recognized my limitations in offering assistance. Focused on my own endeavors, I worked diligently in a comfortable living space, gradually accruing more resources. Contemplating new ventures, I aimed to spend quality time with my cheerful father, appreciating every moment with him. I regretfully forgot my wallet again, so I asked if my friend could cover the bill. When my niece's school had an extended break, it became a routine for my single mother's sister-in-law and her daughter to stay at our house. Initially, I sympathized with her situation and believed in helping out. But over time, she began taking it for granted. One day, she insisted on going to a new outlet mall nearby, and reluctantly, I agreed. However, she conveniently forgot her wallet and demanded that I pay, frustrating me. Despite this, I didn't want to disappoint my sweet niece, who often went without due to their circumstances. Reluctantly, I covered the cost, insisting my sister-in-law repay me. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. On another occasion, my sister-in-law demanded another trip to the outlet mall, and this time, I was determined not to give in. My husband and I, in our 30s and married for 5 years without children, had discussed the possibility of infertility and decided to let things happen naturally. Our parents were supportive, understanding that not every couple follows the same path. Though still hopeful for children, we were planning our future without excluding the possibility of living without them. My younger brother, still single, once joked about having lots of kids for my share, seemingly unaware of our fertility discussions. Meanwhile, my husband's older sister, the sister-in-law in this story, was a single mother who regularly visited us during her daughter's school vacations. While I suggested alternatives, she insisted on staying, citing financial hardship. My niece, adorable and well-behaved, quickly became close to us, creating cherished summer memories at our house. As she entered middle school, the expenses began to mount with stationery, magazines, and fashion. Despite not wanting to interfere, my husband and I decided to give a generous middle school entrance gift. Touched by the thoughtful thank you letter, we looked forward to enjoying our separate vacations due to his work commitments. However, after Marine Day, my sister-in-law and niece unexpectedly arrived, announcing their month-long stay, reminiscent of previous years. I reminded her of our agreement to end these extended stays, but she brushed it off, saying, "I'll just stay in the room." Entering the room confidently, my sister-in-law remarked, "I've used every year," while my niece hesitated. Urged by her mother, my niece hurriedly brought their luggage, apologizing to me before following. Casually settling in, my sister-in-law suggested a visit to a new nearby outlet mall. Controlling the air conditioner and changing settings, she made herself comfortable, expressing delight at not worrying about saving electricity while sipping on a chilled beer my husband had prepared. Frustrated, I called my husband, who couldn't leave work due to their unexpected visit. He asked me to handle his sister for the time being, promising to talk to her when he got home, even if it meant working late. Troubled by her unexpected stay, I couldn't ask him to leave work early. Reluctantly, I decided it was better to take my sister-in-law and niece to the outlet mall than to have them linger around the house. My niece, seemingly interested, nodded along with her mother's conversation. Despite my reservations, I couldn't bring myself to ask her to endure it, especially considering she's my husband's relative. Unprepared for lunch and with unexpected guests, I reluctantly agreed to take them to the outlet mall, opting for a bus due to the heat. Complaining about the walk and the absence of the car, my sister-in-law begrudgingly understood the situation. As we arrived at the outlet mall, she started fussing about forgetting her wallet. Her explanation about mistakenly putting her credit card back in her wallet didn't make sense. While I pondered her story, my niece looked momentarily disappointed but soon smiled, saying she's happy just looking around. Feeling sorry for my niece, I suggested covering today's shopping, estimating it wouldn't exceed $400 for 3 people. However, my sister-in-law seemed most delighted, eyeing expensive items from famous brands. I ended up playing the role of her wallet, using my credit card since I didn't have enough cash. Demanding repayment as soon as we got home, my sister-in-law claimed she couldn't do it right away, citing a lack of cash and a forgotten bank card. When I suggested using her credit card's cash advance, she claimed her credit cards had expired, blaming a mix-up with a new one. I pressed her for proof, incredulous that she had allowed her cards to expire 3 months ago. She explained that she had panicked and switched wallets when her old one broke, making an honest mistake. She didn't want her in-laws to know about her financial struggles. Having already burdened them with the divorce, I found it challenging to be too harsh with my sister-in-law, especially since she promised to repay me once back at her house. During that summer, she stayed with us for about a month. While my niece eagerly helped with housework and expressed interest in cooking, my sister-in-law assumed a more demanding mother-in-law-like role, questioning the delay in lunch and criticizing our approach to saving electricity. My sister-in-law never contributed to housework and complained twice as much as anyone else. With her and my niece's presence, daily chores expanded to doing laundry for 4 people. When I mentioned the no air conditioning rule, complaints tripled. Frustrated, I asked my sister-in-law for help in hanging the laundry, but she dismissed it, insisting that being in the sun affected her skin and demanding an expensive sunscreen brand. After a month of enduring this, my sister-in-law finally left with my niece. However, when I asked her to repay the money she owed, she refused, claiming she couldn't do it before payday. Persistent in my demands, I eventually sent a certified letter as proof. When my niece discovered her mother hadn't repaid the money, she revealed that her mother had been receiving financial support from her ex-in-laws since the divorce. My niece promised to take responsibility and repay me from the financial support her mother received. She also expressed concern about her mother's increasingly sloppy lifestyle, embarrassing her. This situation fueled my anger towards my carefree sister-in-law. With my niece approaching high school and college expenses looming, I felt compelled to teach my sister-in-law a lesson. Taking advantage of the school break, my sister-in-law and niece stayed with us again. Immediately upon arrival, my sister-in-law demanded a trip to the outlet mall, claiming she needed winter clothes. Sensing a potential repeat of her carelessness, I had already contacted some allies. After about 2 hours of shopping, my sister-in-law called, admitting she forgot her wallet and requested I cover the cost. Half of me thought it was typical, while the other half was exasperated. Claiming that my niece wasn't feeling well and we had already gone home, I declined to cover her expenses. Infuriated by her carelessness regarding her daughter, I emphasized that all she had to do was admit she didn't have enough money and return the items. Why did I have to cover the expenses for her shopping? Regardless, I needed to proceed with my plan. I informed her that I would be back soon after dropping my niece off at home. She questioned the time frame, and I mentioned I had just reached a nearby bus stop, indicating it would take another hour using public transportation. Surprisingly, she accepted this without demanding a taxi, making me suspicious that she might be up to something. She likely didn't want to risk me not coming back if she complained too much. An hour later, I arrived at the designated store with my collaborators. My sister-in-law was there, arms full of clothes and bags, instructing the staff to add more items. It seemed she planned to shop even more while awaiting my return. When I greeted her with an apology for the delay, she was surprised to see familiar faces beside me. Alongside me stood my husband, who was supposed to be at work, and then my father-in-law appeared, changing my sister-in-law's expression from surprise to confusion. She stammered, questioning why my husband was there. In truth, I had informed him about her failure to repay the money, and he was aware of everything that had transpired. He had agreed with my plan and was actually at home on a day off, hiding in the bedroom when my sister-in-law arrived. I had followed our plan and told her he was at work, and she believed me without checking. After hearing the story from my niece, my husband agreed that we should inform his parents. We reported everything, including her extended stay and refusal to repay the money. When I explained our plan for the day to my in-laws, they were furious, saying it was outrageous. After separating from my sister-in-law at the mall, I immediately contacted them. My husband had driven ahead and waited for us. My niece and I left my sister-in-law and went to the parking lot, where my husband was waiting to drive us to a hotel to meet my in-laws. They had planned to go on a short trip to a rural area, but they prioritized our situation over their trip and waited at the hotel. I felt bad that their plans were ruined, but they insisted on dealing with my sister-in-law's antics first. As planned, we left my niece with my mother-in-law at the hotel and returned to the outlet mall. When we confronted her, my sister-in-law furiously accused me of being cheeky for someone who was just a wallet to her. However, my husband and father-in-law took away all the clothes and bags she was holding. My husband retorted, "What are you doing? Don't return my clothes. They're not yours if you're not paying for them." My sister-in-law hesitated for a moment as my father-in-law returned the items to the store staff. My husband then dragged her out, and as he pulled her arm, she screamed, "It hurts. Let me go. Someone help, he's attacking me." Realizing she couldn't overpower him, she started accusing my husband of being a villain. My father-in-law, who had returned from explaining to the store, pulled out something from his jacket pocket. He was, in fact, a police officer. "I just happened to witness the incident," he explained, and everyone around us stopped listening to my sister-in-law's complaints. They pushed her into my husband's car parked in the lot. After reporting her actions to my in-laws, my father-in-law immediately checked her bank account. My niece knew where the passbook was, so they checked at my sister-in-law's house while she was away. The in-laws had been providing her with a monthly stipend, believing her claim of wanting to save the divorce settlement money for my niece's future. However, the entire amount was withdrawn on the day it was deposited, leaving a zero balance. The account in my niece's name, supposed to contain the divorce settlement, was almost empty because my sister-in-law didn't receive alimony due to her fault in the divorce. She also withdrew the child support from her ex-husband immediately after it was deposited. Furthermore, she confessed to not working, despite telling her parents she was. She spent her days leisurely using the support money and child support. The divorce settlement money she claimed to save for my niece was spent on her lifestyle. When it ran out, she planned to make me buy designer goods and sell them for cash. She even boasted about how well-known Target outlet items sold. My father-in-law hung his head in shame and apologized to us. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I showed them a video as evidence. It captured my sister-in-law red-handed. Whenever she and her daughter stayed with us, my husband's and my belongings mysteriously disappeared. It was too coincidental to happen every time, and more items vanished with each visit. Without proof, I couldn't accuse her, but I kept an eye on her. After she didn't repay the money I had fronted, I couldn't watch her all the time, so I installed hidden cameras in our rooms. Multiple times during her stay, she seemed to be searching our room when I was out. Finally, she began to blatantly steal. Just before leaving, there were times when she had checked the location many times and would go straight to his destination and steal what she was looking for. With practiced skill, she knew exactly where to go, swiftly taking specific items like my jewelry and my husband's luxury watch. The cameras caught her in the act, even capturing her face as she didn't notice them. My father-in-law, a police officer, was visibly furious, saying it's shameful to have a criminal in the family. He was overwhelmed with anger and sadness. When confronted, my sister-in-law brazenly claimed she had already sold the stolen items. My father-in-law instructed us to file a police report and submit the video as evidence. However, we were hesitant about turning in our own family, It's not a crime among aims, right? We don't count someone who exploits kindness and repays generosity with evil as family, my husband said as he started the car engine. My sister-in-law asked, "Where are you taking me?" My father-in-law answered, "To the police, obviously." She screamed as if it was the end of the world, begging us for mercy. She tried to destroy my phone, claiming it would erase the evidence, but I informed her it was just a copy, and the original was safe at home. She resigned to silence when she realized she had no escape. She pleaded, "I'll repay the money. Just don't take me to the police." It's not just a matter of getting your money back. The stolen items had sentimental value. It wasn't just about the money. My jewelry I bought with my first salary, gifts from my husband, and heirlooms from my late grandmother. The same went for my husband's luxury watch. But we worried about what would happen to my niece if her mother became a criminal. We thought my in-laws would take care of her, but it would hurt her to know her mother was a thief. So, for my niece's sake, we proposed not to file a report if she kept her promise to repay us. My father-in-law agreed to ensure she kept this promise. She had to repay a set amount each month earned through her own labor. If she failed, we would immediately file a report. I told him that I had recorded the entire conversation as suggested by my father-in-law for evidence. My sister-in-law had no way to deny or forget what was said. She had no choice but to hang her head in the face of the reality that "I don't know, I didn't say it, I forgot" was no longer valid. Later, she was taken back to her parents' house by my father-in-law. We received an apology from my in-laws later. They admitted they had been too lenient due to their love for their granddaughter and their daughter's manipulations. They realized they had spoiled her too much and vowed to re-educate her strictly. My sister-in-law, who had always been pampered, thought it was her due. After getting engaged, she quit her job to become a housewife. Even though it was difficult to get a job again after the divorce, my sister-in-law herself confessed that she thought she was only working part-time, but in reality, she wasn't working at all. After her divorce, she didn't even attempt to work, saying she didn't want to be associated with unfashionable older women. My father-in-law, knowing she was too sheltered, arranged for her to work at a company owned by his acquaintance. The owner was strict but fair. She struggled with basic manners and language, and her salary was managed by my mother-in-law, used to repay us. My sister-in-law and her daughter moved out of the house left by her ex-husband and now live under strict supervision with her parents. My niece is becoming a more responsible person, helping her grandparents. She plans to stay with them during the winter break, but looks forward to visiting us during the spring break. My husband and I are excited for her next visit. As for my sister-in-law, regardless of any change in her, she is not welcome in our house. We both agree it's best to avoid unpleasant feelings. I am Nancy, and I have an older brother named Keith who is 7 years my senior. Keith has always been academically exceptional since childhood, consistently delivering top-notch performances. He graduated from a prestigious high school and university, making our parents immensely proud. However, the constant praise and high expectations seemed to shape his personality in an unexpected way as he grew older. After completing his education and securing a new job, Keith decided to leave our family home. During his departure, he sarcastically remarked about being unable to endure the mundane life in our house any longer. I can vividly recall the mixed emotions on our parents' faces at that moment, surprise and a hint of sadness. In the past, Keith was a cheerful and cherished member of the family. Personally, I felt a twinge of anger. I never excelled academically or in sports like my brother did. My high school wasn't super prestigious, but I valued the warmth and love within our family. Both Keith and I owe our lives to our parents' support. It saddened me that he seemed to overlook the importance of our family bonds. As a child, Keith was my hero, handling everything perfectly and caring for me. However, as I approached graduation from high school, he began questioning the need for higher education and dismissed my pursuits. When confronted by our parents, he blamed them for his changed attitude. Despite the challenges, I persevered, entering a national university, and securing a job at my dream company. My parents' encouragement helped shape me into a kind-hearted person. However, my brother's life took a different turn. He was already married, and neither my parents nor I had met his wife. One day during work hours, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Worried about the unusual call, I stepped outside to answer discreetly. My mother's voice, softer than usual, revealed that my father had suddenly fallen ill. Distressed by the news, I immediately informed my supervisor, rushed to the hospital, and hoped for the best. Entering the waiting room, I was met with my mother in tears, desperately seeking comfort. Anxious, I asked, "What happened, Mom?" I anxiously sat beside my mother, struggling to comprehend how my father, who seemed perfectly fine that morning, had suddenly ended up in this condition. My words tumbled out one after another as I asked the question that refused to settle in my mind. After a brief pause, my mother quietly uttered, "Your father has been diagnosed with cancer." Time seemed to freeze as the weight of her words sank in. The surprise and anxiety within me spilled out in my voice. My mother took a deep breath and, with a tone heavy with sadness, continued, "It's stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bile duct, and they said it's hard to remove it all." Her tears flowed uncontrollably, and I struggled to find words as I listened to this devastating news. Seeking a glimmer of hope, I inquired about the next steps in treatment. My mother nodded somberly, and after a short pause, the attending physician arrived to explain the detailed condition and treatment options. The grim reality hit us as we learned that the illness had progressed more than expected, with confirmed metastasis to other parts. The doctor conveyed the significant risks of surgery and the uncertainty of success. My mother and I, holding hands, tried to come to terms with this harsh reality. The doctor's matter-of-fact words emphasized the gravity of the situation. We were faced with crucial choices, continuing with chemotherapy or opting for support in a palliative care ward. The heavy silence in the waiting room was broken only by the ticking of the clock's second hand. As tears quietly streamed down my mother's face, I pondered how to approach the situation. Despite the challenging circumstances, necessary discussions needed to take place. Realizing the importance of including my brother Keith, I suggested contacting him immediately to make a decision together. With a forced smile, my mother admitted that she had already informed Keith, but he hadn't responded. Recalling my brother's nature and past events, I had a premonition of his potential reaction. Keith tended to get upset when seeking help, avoiding tough decisions. Determined to involve the entire family in this critical decision, I persisted in calling him. After more than 10 attempts, I finally heard my brother's slightly irritated voice. "Why do you keep calling me?" he snapped. Urgently and anxiously, I explained Dad's condition, questioning why he hadn't come to the hospital despite being informed. His response lacked empathy or understanding, shaking me to the core. Unmoved by the gravity of the situation, he dismissed it as unnecessary concern, stating, "There's no point in discussing further. I'm hanging up." Stunned, I was left reeling from the exchange. I found myself in a state of bewilderment, unable to conceal my astonishment at my brother's indifference. I was aware of his lack of a sense of family bond and gratitude, but the extent of his detachment was beyond what I had anticipated. When I returned to my mother, a look of concern was evident on her face. In response to her inquiry about what happened, I explained that it seemed he was quite busy, avoiding the details. My mother sighed deeply, murmuring that it would have been comforting if Keith was here. My father, choosing to spend his final moments in a palliative care ward, quietly passed away a few months after that decision. I conveyed this somber news to my brother over the phone and provided details of the wake and funeral. However, his response was cold, stating he was too busy with work to attend, urging us to proceed without him. True to his word, he didn't appear at our father's wake or funeral. Even my mother seemed shocked by this fact, likely never imagining her son wouldn't show up for his father's funeral. Both family and acquaintances expressed surprise and disappointment at his absence. After the funeral, In a moment of quiet reflection amongst the family, my mother sighed deeply, muttering to herself that he really didn't come. I took her hand and reassured her, saying firmly, "Mom, let's not worry about him anymore. We have to let him walk his path. For now, let's cherish our memories of Dad." My mother tightly squeezed my hand in response, smiling and saying, "Thank you." Unexpectedly, the next day, my older brother appeared at the apartment where we live. His usual expression was replaced with an urgent restlessness. Without any greeting, he demanded to know, "Where is the inheritance Father left behind?" Shocked by his demand, I emotionally retorted, expressing disbelief at someone who didn't even attend the funeral now making such inquiries. Visibly irritated, my brother snapped at me, saying, "The kid should stay quiet," creating a tense atmosphere. Attempting to calm the situation, my mother explained that, apart from the apartment, our father didn't leave much behind. She presented my father's passbook on the table, flipping through it to reveal that all the savings were transferred to a different account. My brother, taken aback, asked in surprise, "What is this all about?" Gently, my mother replied, "Your father instructed to move all the money to my account earlier. Also, this apartment's name has been changed, and now it's in my name." Left speechless, my brother clicked his tongue in frustration and left. Watching his departing figure, we were once again filled with admiration and gratitude for our father's foresight and his plan to protect the family. A few months later, my mother unexpectedly fell and was rushed to the hospital. The family was filled with shock and concern upon learning that she had pneumonia in a more advanced stage than initially thought. Despite feeling relieved when she was diagnosed with a minor cold at a small clinic, detailed examinations at a major hospital revealed a much more severe condition with only about 3 months to live. Hearing this news left me at a loss for words. I found it hard to believe, especially considering how healthy she appeared. Tragically, just a few days after the 3-month mark, my mother quietly passed away. The absence left behind an indescribable stillness and sorrow. Filled with guilt and grief, I questioned why I hadn't noticed sooner or taken her to a larger hospital immediately. Even after learning about my mother's pain, my brother showed no signs of coming to our house. My aunt, my mother's sister, and I handled the arrangements for the wake and the funeral. Understandably, it was a significant shock for my aunt that my brother didn't appear at our mother's last rites, just as he hadn't for our father's. Although my aunt was extremely outraged, I felt that expecting anything or saying anything to my brother was meaningless, recalling his past actions. However, a few days after the funeral, as my aunt and I were sorting out the heirlooms, my brother appeared again, accompanied by his wife, whom we were meeting for the first time. "Where's Mom's inheritance? She must have left something, right?" My brother brought up this question from the beginning. I was both shocked and dumbfounded. My aunt, equally stunned, stared at him in disbelief. The most astonishing thing was that beside my brother stood his wife, my new sister-in-law, whom neither met our eyes nor greeted us, just standing silently next to my brother. Even more shocking was that my brother did not even visit our mother's grave. "Brother, please at least pay your respects to our parents. At the very least, visit Mom's grave," I said calmly. With a sneering laugh, my brother responded, "Does that even mean anything?" He quickly followed with, "By the way, how much of Mom's inheritance is left?" At that moment, May's expression changed drastically. In a voice filled with anger, contrasting with her usual warmth, she sternly admonished Keith, "How can you think of such things at a time like this? Nancy is managing the funeral on behalf of both of you, putting in all her effort. Shouldn't you act with a bit of gratitude, thinking of your parents?" Ignoring our aunt's anger, my brother responded dismissively, "Auntie, it's none of your business. Don't interfere." With these demands from my brother and sister-in-law, the atmosphere in the room became cold and tense. Behind my brother, my smiling sister-in-law said, "Of course, I remember your name, Nancy. Do you plan to keep all of your mother's inheritance for yourself?" "Sorry, but we can't allow that. This apartment is so lovely. I think it's perfect for us." I never imagined that my brother and his wife would say such things. Why should I have to leave for the sake of both of you? I asked, my voice quivering. While twirling her finger, my sister-in-law continued, "This apartment has just been renovated, and its location is amazing. It's close to the station, and there are plenty of shops, so we'll be living here." At the peak of my anger, I confronted my big brother, asking, "All you care about is the inheritance. What are you thinking?" Unable to hold back, I raised my voice, turning away. My brother let out a heavy sigh. Such vulgar behavior. "Do you think raising your voice solves everything? We'll be back here in 3 days. Have everything ready to move out by then." With those words, their intentions became crystal clear. A mix of my anger and sadness bubbled up, and I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. But this wasn't just a one-time event. I had to think about what to do next. Determined, I wiped my tears, and my aunt gently tapped my shoulder, handing me a letter. The delicate handwriting of my mother adorned the envelope's surface. "What's this, Auntie?" I cautiously opened the envelope, my aunt explaining, "Your mother entrusted this to me for a just-in-case scenario. She told me to give it to you at the right moment." Tears formed in her eyes as I unfolded the paper inside. My mother's beautiful handwriting filled the page. "To my precious Nancy, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer in this world. I'm truly sorry for our parting," it began. A warmth filled the back of my eyes, tears beginning to flow. The letter continued, "You might have Keith visit the house concerning the inheritance, but don't worry, everything that your father handed down to me is now yours." I was at a loss for words, unaware that my mother had thought this far ahead and prepared everything in advance. The letter expressed her apologies for leaving me alone suddenly, but mentioned she was at peace, having witnessed how much I had grown into a wonderful person. While learning is essential, it's not everything. The kindness and compassion you learn through your interactions with people hold the most value, she wrote. Expressing pride in me, my mother stated, "Your father and I were genuinely happy to see you grow up with such a warm heart until our last days." The letter conveyed heartfelt gratitude, leaving me overwhelmed. Despite the tears blurring the words, I was determined to take in every sentiment my mother had conveyed and continued reading. She revealed that, following my father's wishes, she had secretly changed the apartment's ownership to my name. "I'm sorry for using your seal without permission, but it was both your father's and my wish. Please don't be angry," she wrote. The letter encouraged me to persevere through life's ups and downs, urging me to stay strong and find happiness. The letter ended, and tears streamed down my face, wetting the paper. My aunt, standing next to me, pressed her eyes and shed tears alongside me. "Your sister truly cared about you. In her heart, you were a treasure," my aunt said gently, holding my hand. From the envelope, a bank book in my name emerged, revealing a substantial amount, likely the inheritance my mother had saved for me. A few days later, my brother and his wife showed up at the house without even knocking on the door. "It's time for you to leave, just as promised, right?" my brother sarcastically said. As I stood still, my sister-in-law became irritated, demanding, "Isn't it your duty to leave quickly?" I took a deep breath, looked them straight in the eyes, and calmly stated, "Actually, this house is now under my name." The room's atmosphere became tense. My brother and his wife looked at each other, exclaiming, "What kind of joke is this? I am the eldest son. I should inherit the house, right?" My brother said, clearly shaken. Beside him, my sister-in-law stared at me, saying, "This is the first I've heard of this." However, I had decided to state the facts. The house and the inheritance are all managed under my name, so there's nothing to divide. My brother frowned and insisted, "Then hand over half of that inheritance to us." I questioned, "But this money was left for my future and to ensure that I take care of the house. You always looked down on me, and now you're asking for money. What changed?" His face turned red, and surprisingly, my sister-in-law exclaimed, "Wait, what is this? This isn't what we were expecting." From what I gathered, my brother recently faced significant trouble at his job and was subsequently fired. Not only that, but he and his wife were moving from one day job to another, seemingly in a tight spot financially. With my revelation, their expectations were shattered, and they began bickering, placing blame on one another. Calmly, I said, "This is my house now. If you make any unnecessary fuss, I'll call the police." Trembling with anger, they reluctantly accepted my words and left. Since then, I've had no contact with them. I deliberately deleted all their contact details and began a new life in this apartment, my treasure filled with memories of my father and mother. Now I have a loving partner by my side, and we plan to build a new family in this apartment. He respects my decision and proposed that we take the first step of our new life here. Our future is bright, and I want to pass on the warm love my parents gave me to the children we will have in the future.
The smell of cumin and charred peppers still clung to my apron as I pulled into the commissary kitchen parking lot at 5:47 a.m. Another 14-hour day stretched ahead of me, prepping for 3 food trucks that would serve nearly 2,000 customers across Los Angeles. The rhythm had become second nature after 8 years. Arrive before dawn, prep the proteins, mix the sauces, load the trucks, and supervise the crews until the last customer was served. My name is Carlos Mendoza, and I built Hermanos food trucks from a single borrowed cart into the most successful mobile food operation in Southern California. What started as a desperate attempt to feed my family after losing my restaurant job had evolved into a 7-truck empire serving authentic Oaxacan cuisine at festivals, corporate events, and street corners from Santa Monica to East LA. Most people saw me as just another guy slinging tacos from a truck window. They didn't know about the culinary degree from the Culinary Institute of America, the years I'd spent perfecting recipes passed down from my grandmother, or the food science knowledge I'd used to develop signature sauces that had food critics comparing my trucks to high-end restaurants. What really set Hermanos apart wasn't just the food, it was the innovation. I'd spent 3 years developing a unique fermentation process for my salsas that created flavors no one else could replicate. My mole recipe used 23 ingredients in precise ratios that I'd calculated through hundreds of test batches. The meat marinades incorporated molecular gastronomy techniques I'd learned working under James Beard Award winners. But the most important thing I'd done was protect it all legally. Every signature recipe, every proprietary technique, every sauce blend was protected by patents filed through my attorney's office. I'd learned that lesson the hard way after watching other chefs have their innovations stolen by larger competitors. As I unlocked the commissary kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Isabella. "Need to talk. Coming by this morning. Important family business." Isabella and I had built Hermanos together, or so I'd thought. She joined me 3 years ago when the business was struggling to expand, bringing what she called business expertise to complement my culinary skills. What she'd actually brought was charm, ambition, and a law degree she'd never mentioned using for anything other than intimidating suppliers and landlords. I taught her everything about the food business: how to read profit margins, manage inventory, deal with health inspectors, and most importantly, how to maintain the quality standards that separated us from every other taco truck in the city. She'd been a quick learner, maybe too quick. The commissary kitchen was a cathedral of stainless steel and industrial equipment where I conducted my daily rituals. 6 gas ranges, 3 convection ovens, 2 massive refrigeration units, and enough prep space to supply a small restaurant. I designed the layout myself, optimizing every square foot for efficiency. I was halfway through preparing the carnitas when Isabella arrived, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. She wore a sharp business suit that looked expensive, her black hair pulled back in the severe style she'd adopted since finishing law school. In her hands was a leather briefcase that looked new, Carlos, she said, setting the briefcase on the prep counter with deliberate precision. We need to discuss the future of Hermanos. I continued seasoning the pork shoulder, not looking up. What about it? I've been reviewing our partnership agreement, she said, opening the briefcase, and I've discovered some irregularities. Something in her tone made me pause. Isabella had always been ambitious, but there was something different now, a coldness that reminded me of the prosecutors I'd watched on television. What kind of irregularities? I asked. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. Discrepancies in the ownership structure. Questions about who actually holds controlling interest in the business. I set down my knife and turned to face her. Isabella, what are you talking about? We're 50-50 partners. We've been through this 100 times. Her smile was sharp enough to cut citrus. Actually, brother, I think you'll find the situation is more complicated than that. She spread several documents across the prep counter, her manicured nails tapping against the stainless steel. These are the original incorporation papers for Hermanos Food Trucks LLC. Notice anything interesting? I leaned over to examine the papers, recognizing my signature on several pages. But as I read more carefully, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The ownership percentages weren't 50-50 as I remembered. According to these documents, Isabella held 65% of the company. This is wrong, I said immediately. I never signed anything giving you majority control. Isabella's smile widened. Are you sure about that? Because your signature is right there, witnessed and notarized. I grabbed the papers, studying them more closely. The signatures looked authentic, but I clearly remembered negotiating equal partnership. These have been altered. That's a serious accusation, Carlos. I hope you have proof. The way she said it made it clear she knew I didn't. I'd been so focused on building the business that I trusted family to handle the legal paperwork. A mistake that was now staring me in the face with my own forged signature. What do you want? I asked quietly. Isabella walked over to where I had been preparing the carnitas, running her finger along the edge of the prep table. I want what's mine. Full control of Hermanos Food Trucks. Full control. You can stay on as head chef, she said magnanimously. I'm not unreasonable, but the business decisions, the expansion plans, the financial management, that all needs to be handled by someone with actual business training. I stared at her, this woman I'd taught to dice onions, who'd learned to balance spice levels by watching me work 18-hour days. Isabella, I built this business from nothing, and I've grown it into something profitable, she replied. But we've reached the limits of what your approach can accomplish. It's time for professional management. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out another set of documents. These are transfer papers. Sign them, and you can continue doing what you do best, cooking. Refuse, and I'll be forced to exercise my majority ownership rights anyway. I looked at the papers, then back at my sister. You planned this. I prepared for this, she corrected. There's a difference. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units and the distant sound of traffic beginning to build outside. I thought about the years I'd spent building Hermanos, the early mornings, the rejected loan applications, the nights I'd stayed up developing recipes while Isabella was in law school. You always were the dumb one, Carlos, Isabella said, her voice taking on the tone she used when we were children and she'd gotten me in trouble with our parents. I've got lawyers. You've got grease stains. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. But instead of anger, I felt something else. A cold clarity I'd learned from years of managing high-pressure kitchen situations. I walked to the key rack near the door and removed 7 sets of truck keys, each marked with the name of one of our locations. Isabella watched me with satisfaction as I placed them on the prep counter next to her documents. "Take them," I said quietly. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Just like that? You want the business? You've got it." I signed the transfer papers without reading them, my signature steady despite the betrayal burning in my chest. Isabella gathered the documents with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment for months. "You're making the right choice," she said, but I detected a note of surprise in her voice. She'd expected a fight. "I know," I replied. What Isabella didn't know was that she just signed papers taking ownership of 7 food trucks, 3 commissary kitchens, and a customer database. What she didn't own were the recipes, the proprietary techniques, or the trade secrets that made Hermanos successful. Because 5 years ago, acting on advice from my intellectual property attorney, I filed patents on every significant recipe and cooking process we used. The fermentation method for my salsas, the precise blend of spices in my mole, the molecular gastronomy techniques I'd adapted for food truck service, even the specific temperatures and timing for my carnitas preparation. All of it was protected under my name, not the business name. Isabella now owned a fleet of trucks that legally couldn't serve the food that made them successful. After she left, keys and documents in hand, I sat in the empty commissary kitchen and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of grief. Not for the business, I could build another one, but for the sister I'd thought I knew, who just revealed herself to be someone I'd never really understood. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "Patricia," I said when she answered. "It's Carlos. I need to discuss licensing agreements for my food patents." "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. "I heard through the grapevine that there might be some changes at Hermanos. Isabella took over the business today, used forged documents to claim majority ownership." There was a pause. "And the patents? Still mine. All of them. Then she's about to have a very expensive education in intellectual property law." The first signs of trouble appeared within a week. Isabella had immediately started improving operations, bringing in consultants and efficiency experts who didn't understand the delicate balance of flavors that made our food special. She'd also fired 3 of our most experienced cooks, replacing them with cheaper labor. By the second week, I started getting calls from longtime customers complaining about the food quality. The carnitas were overcooked. The salsa verde lacked the complex fermented tang that had made it famous. The mole tasted flat and one-dimensional. "Carlos," said Miguel Ramirez, who ran a construction company that had been ordering lunch for his crews for 3 years. "What happened to the food? My guys are saying it tastes like every other truck." I explained that I was no longer involved in day-to-day operations, which was technically true. What I didn't mention was that Isabella's new cooks were trying to reverse engineer my recipes without understanding the science behind them. On Thursday of the 3rd week, I received a call from Derek Chen, the food critic for Le Weekly, who'd written the review that had launched Hermanos into citywide recognition. "Carlos, I need to ask you something," Derek said. "I ate at your truck yesterday, and the food was different. Not bad exactly, but not the same. Has something changed?" "New management," I said carefully. "The mole especially. It tasted like someone had tried to recreate it from memory, but missed some key component. That's perceptive." "Are you still involved with the business?" I looked out the window of my apartment, where I'd been spending my days developing new recipes and planning my next move. "Not anymore." Derek was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that. The food scene in LA needs more people like you." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my attorney. It was time for the next phase. The legal papers were served to Isabella on a Tuesday morning while she was at the main commissary kitchen trying to figure out why her food costs had increased by 30% while quality had decreased. According to my contact at the kitchen, Maria, who'd worked with me since the beginning, Isabella's face went white as she read the cease and desist order. The document was comprehensive and devastating. It detailed every patent I held on the recipes and processes that defined Hermanos food trucks, the fermentation method for the salsas, the specific spice blend ratios for the mole, the marination techniques for the carnitas, even the precise temperature controls for the cooking process. All of it was legally protected intellectual property that belonged to Carlos Mendoza, not Hermanos Food Trucks LLC. The order gave Isabella 48 hours to stop using any of the patented recipes or face federal charges for intellectual property theft. It also demanded immediate payment of licensing fees for the unauthorized use that had already occurred, calculated at fair market value for a business generating over $2 million annually. Isabella called me within an hour. "Carlos, what the hell is this?" Her voice was strained, the confident businesswoman replaced by someone who just discovered they'd been walking through a minefield. "Intellectual property protection," I said calmly. "Something you should have researched before taking over a business you didn't understand. You can't do this. Those recipes are part of the business." Actually, they're not. They're patented innovations that I developed and filed separately from any business entity. Check with your lawyers. There was a long pause. "How much do you want?" "For licensing the recipes?" $200,000 annually, plus back fees for the 3 weeks you've been using them without authorization. $200,000? That's insane. That's what happens when you steal someone's life work and try to profit from it without permission. I could hear papers rustling in the background. There has to be some way to work this out. We're family. Family doesn't forge documents and steal businesses from each other. "Carlos, please. The trucks are failing without the real recipes. We're losing customers every day." That much was true. According to my sources, daily revenue had dropped by 40% as word spread that the food quality had declined. Food truck customers were intensely loyal, but only as long as the product remained consistent. "Then you'd better figure out how to make your own recipes," I said, "because mine aren't available to you anymore." I hung up and returned to the work I'd been doing since leaving Hermanos, developing a new food truck concept that would make my sister's operation look like amateur hour. The next few weeks played out exactly as I'd expected. Isabella tried hiring new chefs to recreate my recipes, but they were working without the patent documentation that detailed the precise techniques. They could approximate the flavors, but they couldn't replicate the complexity that had made Hermanos special. Customer complaints escalated to negative Yelp reviews. The food blogger who'd helped launch our reputation wrote a scathing piece titled "The Fall of Hermanos: When Good Food Goes Bad." Derek Chen published a follow-up review that basically served as an obituary for what had been his favorite food truck operation. Meanwhile, I was quietly assembling the team for my new venture. I reached out to the 3 experienced cooks Isabella had fired, offering them positions at significantly higher wages. I contacted our former suppliers, many of whom had been frustrated by Isabella's attempts to cut costs by compromising quality. Most importantly, I filed patents on 12 new recipes I'd developed during my forced hiatus, innovations that would define the next generation of authentic Mexican street food. The call I'd been expecting came on a Friday evening. Isabella's voice was different now, smaller, defeated. "Carlos, I need help." What kind of help? The business is failing. We're hemorrhaging money. I made a mistake. I sat in my new commercial kitchen, a space I'd leased in preparation for launching my new operation. Around me were the tools and ingredients for recipes that would soon make Isabella's stolen business obsolete. What do you want from me? I want to make this right. Give you back control of Hermanos. We can go back to being partners. 50-50 partners? I asked. Yes, like it was supposed to be. I was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. Isabella had destroyed 3 months of business relationships, damaged the reputation I'd spent years building, and proven she couldn't be trusted with anything more complicated than a microwave. I'm not interested, I said finally. Carlos, please. I'll do anything. The lawyers are saying we owe hundreds of thousands in patent fees. The customers are gone. The trucks are sitting empty. Then sell them. Who's going to buy food trucks that can't serve food? It was a fair question. Without access to my recipes, Isabella owned 7 expensive vehicles that couldn't generate revenue. She'd created her own elaborate trap and walked directly into it. That's not my problem anymore, I said. 2 weeks later, I received a notification that Hermanos Food Trucks LLC had filed for bankruptcy. Isabella had lost everything: the trucks, the commissary kitchens, the customer database she thought was so valuable. The bankruptcy court would liquidate the assets to pay creditors, and Isabella would be left with nothing but the legal bills from her failed theft. The final irony came when my new venture, Corazon Street Kitchen, purchased 3 of the Hermanos trucks at the bankruptcy auction for 30 cents on the dollar. I painted them in my new colors, deep red with gold accents, and equipped them with the tools needed to serve my next-generation recipes. On opening day, lines formed before we'd even fired up the grills. Word had spread through the food community that Carlos Mendoza was back, and the customers who'd been disappointed by Isabella's poor management were eager to taste authentic Mexican street food again. Derek Chen was among the first customers, ordering one of everything and taking careful notes as he ate. When he finished, he approached the service window where I was working alongside my crew. "It's even better than before," he said simply. "Different recipes," I replied, "but the same commitment to quality." 3 months later, Derek's review ran under the headline, "Phoenix Rising: Carlos Mendoza's Triumphant Return to Lay Street Food." He described Corazon Street Kitchen as what happens when authentic passion meets culinary innovation, and declared my new al pastor recipe a masterpiece of molecular gastronomy adapted for mass service. The review launched us into the stratosphere. Within 6 months, we had a wait list of corporate clients, a catering business that booked solid through the following year, and requests for franchising opportunities from across the country. Isabella never contacted me again. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd moved back in with our parents and was working as a paralegal for a personal injury firm. The law degree that had seemed so impressive when she was stealing my business hadn't prepared her for the realities of intellectual property law or the food service industry. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about her downfall. Then I remembered her words, "You always were the dumb one, Carlos. I got lawyers. You've got grease stains." She'd been half right. I did have grease stains. But I also had something she'd never understood, the knowledge that real success comes from creating value, not stealing it. The patience to protect your innovations before someone tries to take them, and the wisdom to know that family loyalty has to work both ways. A year after Isabella's betrayal, I stood in my new flagship restaurant, a brick-and-mortar location in the Arts District that served as both a showcase for my culinary innovations and the headquarters for what had become a multi-million-dollar food empire. The walls were lined with patents, awards, and photos from the early days when I had served customers from a single borrowed cart. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek Chen. Heard through the grapevine that someone's trying to sell a tell-all book about the real story behind Hermanos. Interested in commenting? I smiled and typed back. No comment necessary. The food speaks for itself. Because in the end, that's what it always came down to. Isabella had thought she could steal a business by forging documents and hiring lawyers. But you can't steal passion, expertise, or the kind of innovation that comes from dedicating your life to perfecting a craft. She'd taken my trucks and my customers, but she'd never understood that those were just the delivery mechanism. The real value was in the knowledge, the recipes, and the commitment to excellence that I carried in my head and my hands. And that no lawyer could ever steal. The last I heard, someone had purchased the old Hermanos name from the bankruptcy court and was trying to restart the business using generic recipes. They lasted 3 months before closing permanently. Meanwhile, Corazon Street Kitchen continued to grow, not through theft or shortcuts, but through the same principles that had built Hermanos originally: authentic flavors, innovative techniques, and the understanding that success in the food business comes from respecting both the ingredients and the customers. I never saw Isabella again, but sometimes I caught glimpses of her in the mistakes made by other entrepreneurs who confused taking with building, who thought legal maneuvers could replace competence, and who discovered too late that grease stains are often the mark of someone who understands value in ways that lawyers never will.